What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Fire's Fire. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Jameson Wellborn. As always, I'm joined by my two co-hosts, the talented Dr. Brian Paul, as well as RJ Ellis. And today we have got a super exciting show for you. We're really excited. I know all three of us have been following Rakkems for a really long time. This guy has been more than generous with the amount of tech that he's given out. And without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Nick, better known as Rakkems. Nick, thanks so much for taking the time, man.
What's up, brother?
How's
How
it
y'all
going,
doing?
bro?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Thank you for joining
on,
us. We greatly appreciate it. I mean,
Yeah, no doubt.
the fact that you were watching our show made us feel like we were that much more legit and actually on the right track. And the fact that you wanted to be on the show is like, oh shit, maybe we do know what we're doing a little bit.
Well, it seems to be the case. I mean, you guys are having on some top-notch, guests, to say the least. So
we appreciate the support. I mean,
Appreciate you, man.
started with RJ wanting to have kind of just like a virtual sesh where things were talked about in the industry, and it's really kind of snowballed from there. And we've gotten a ton of love from the community and a ton of people reaching out, just kind of saying how I really enjoy this format of show, and we're all about highlighting makers and the stories behind them. So kind of just on that, what we like to do at the start of show is you've got so much going on currently, but kind of take us back and let the viewers know a little bit about where you're from and where it all started for you.
yeah, I mean, originally from San Jose, California, South Bay. Was born and raised there until I was about 13, 14 years old, and then moved to the East Bay, agriculture area, like far East Bay. It wasn't actually considered the East Bay then, called Brentwood, Oakley area. Spent my high school years there, and then got to my mid-20s, bought a house out there, had a volatile relationship with an ex, and that split up, and then I met my wife and moved out to the mountains about almost 10 years ago now, about 9 years ago, and never looked back.
In that agricultural area, like, did that have an impact on you? Were you, were you drawn to agricultural practices, or what was taking up most of your free time, during your adolescent years?
I mean, in San Jose, we moved because the area that we lived in San Jose was definitely rough. It's known for its gang violence and whatnot, especially back then, which I was starting to get involved in a lot. So my parents
What
thought it
years
was
are
a
we
good
talking
idea.
about? Like 80s, 90s?
This is early 90s, early to mid 90s. Like I said, I moved from San Jose when I was about 13, 14 years old and was already getting into gang bullshit then. So parents thought it was a good idea to move me out to the sticks, where it's called the Delta. So it's a portion of the bay that's kind of splinters off. Sacramento River comes down and connects to it. It's a big water area. And we used to go out there just to go ride jet skis and hop on boats and things like that. And then my parents were like, "We're moving to that area." It's like, what? No, like that's the sticks. I'm from the city. Like nope, I'm cool. So I was a little rebellious initially, but we moved out there and got involved in a little bit more gang stuff. Not chosen by me. It just kind of followed me around. And I kind of, at that point, I was like, see, I told you. You tried to move me away from San Jose to come to this place to get away from shit, and I got caught up in some shit, and now I just want to go back home. That's all I want to do is go back home. So I fought them, but then kind of once I got into my early 20s and whatnot, kind of realized that it was a lot better decision that they did on my part and my well-being, because it ended up being a better situation all the way around. I met a lot of friends that I'm still friends with and family with there, more so than the people I knew in San Jose growing up as a child, except for a few. There's only like one person that I've known since I was 2 years old, and he was 1 year old. Other than that, I've met everybody else in my life in my late teens, early 20s. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what were you passionate about during that time? Like, I know that you have a history in the automotive space. Did that start at that age? Was that what was taking up your free time?
Were you obsessed with cars? You needed to work your way up to that BMW and that Mercedes?
No Europeans. I definitely was a rat rod, hot rod type of guy. I had a little rockabilly phase when I was younger. My first car was a 52 Chevy Bel Air. My parents bought it for me for $200 or something, and I was taking it apart, and it was just sitting there, but I was taking it apart, and my mom thought that it was just collecting dust. So I got home from school one day, and it was towed to the junkyard and was gone, and it crushed my heart, man. But I mean, I've been involved in automotive my whole entire life. Aside from cannabis, I guess you could say, my only real career and job that I ever did was automotive, whether it was selling parts at auto parts stores, managing auto parts stores, auto shops, or doing lifts, lowering kits and things of that nature. Transmissions were a big one. My dad got me put onto automotive at a young age. He was rebuilding engines. Every month he had a different engine, it seemed like.
Is that what he did for work? Is that what kind of influenced you?
No, he's actually a maintenance mechanic for biotech companies. That's been the majority. So to be more specific, a HVAC technician, so heating, air conditioning, ventilation, all that stuff. That's been his background for forever, working for Lockheed Martin and other big biotech companies in the Bay Area. But he was also a drafter for a while as well, which got me into drafting and which turned that into art. I was pretty big into art when I was younger, but I lost interest in it when all my teachers tried to tell me what to draw instead of allowing me to express myself the way I wanted to. So I mean, I've been an artist for my whole entire life, drawing as soon as I could hold a pencil. The automotive and the art kind of conglomerated into graffiti, and also the rat rods and things of that nature. Lowriders are a big one. I mean, I got a lowrider tattoo right here, Lowrider magazine. So kind of grew up in that Chicano environment, coming from San Jose and then moving to the East Bay. But yeah, that got me into music from there.
So let's talk about that. I mean, your music is a huge part of your life. You're largely involved in a very specific sect of music. How did that come about? You know, was it always drum and bass for you, or did you move through a few genres and eventually find your home?
I mean, I'd like to say it was always drum and bass from the very point, but that's not where I got my foundation in freestyle music. You know, 80s classic b-boy freestyle music. In San Jose, I was DJing, breakdancing little competitions at our local church when I was 15, 14 years old, and didn't really find my place in DJing until I moved to the East Bay and met some of my friends that I can truly call my brothers now. They were all older than me, so back in 9th grade, these guys would have been juniors or seniors. But I was one of the first ones to bring decks around and do dances, you know, my parties out at our quad or for the high school dances and things of that nature, and got a couple of my boys on the same level. Then we kind of started our own crew. I was doing house music, freestyle music, a lot of I don't really like to make this public, but I used to DJ like hard trance for a while, which I'm not proud of, but whatever. And then my boy RJ kind of put me on to drum and bass. He was a drum and bass head before I knew what it was, and that was 98, 99.
Was there like an epiphany? Was there like a moment, like a song?
Oh yeah, there was. Yeah, I just actually had this conversation with somebody online on Facebook. They asked what was the piece of music that put you on to drum and bass, and I still remember it to this day. I heard this tune called "Killer Bees" by Usual Suspects. Me and my boy RJ were walking into a drum and bass room at a rave, and that song was on, and it just like blew my mind. I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And I wanted to know more, so I just started. So I left everything behind after that and just pursued drum and bass as far as production, DJing it, hosting parties, doing a lot of promotion in San Francisco.
Did you have anybody that like influenced you or like mentored you or like brought you up like that, or was it all like self-found? That's a hard journey to go through.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember, like, I wasn't even 21 yet, and so yeah, 99, 98, that's 22, 23 years ago. Damn. I wasn't even 21 yet, but I was on this forum called Ground Score, and there was just nothing but drum and bass. It was the only drum and bass forum in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I would find these club nights and just go out there, and even though all the clubs were 21 and up, I would just hang out at the front on the street with Sharpied CDs with my mixes and give them out to people. And slowly but surely, I'd start meeting the big wigs of our scene in San Francisco.
The
And
real hustle.
They started to recognize me. I started to recognize them more, and just kind of slowly became I slowly became a little bit more of a prominent person in the scene out here, at least, and got the chance to join a couple of crews that did some pretty big stuff out here back in the day. But I mean, as far as influences, I mean, you name them. When it comes to drum and bass, I have no specific one except for currently DJ Craze, who's from Miami, and he's just another level. He's the GOAT, but he also does a lot more than drum and bass as well.
So what was that like? Was that, you're not even 21? Are you immediately going on tour? What's the community like at that point? Like, is there a very healthy circuit that you can jump onto, or was it more?
Oh yeah, I mean, I wasn't really doing too much touring. I was just I was doing a music school in San Francisco at night, so I would go out there a couple nights a week, and then after my classes, I'd go and find a weekly drum and bass club that was going off, whether it was Eclectic or Futuro or Compression Crew, which is still going on currently. I would hang out those spots, and then there was another night called Rhythm Method at a spot called Shadow Lounge, and luckily I got real close with that promoter, and he used to give me and my ex-girlfriend wristbands on the back door and sneak us in, just so we can hang out. And I didn't even care if I was drinking or not. I just wanted to be there. I wanted to be immersed with and surrounded by all these people that I looked up to. So that was the scene was flourishing at that point, early 2000s to mid 2000s. It was, you could go to 3 to 4 different nights or drum and bass parties in one night and just hit up all these amazing shows. And if you had a wristband for one, you go to another one, they give you a discount for having a wristband for this one. It was a way better community. Nowadays it's slowly kind of split apart and sectored off and whatnot, which is always to be expected. The junglists have some of the biggest egos aside from cannabis heads,
Sounds like something really familiar to
yeah, for sure.
So you met your wife in this scene as well. Is that true?
Yeah, she's a drum and bass DJ as well.
Oh, that's
originally it was breaks for her, break beats, and then she got into drum and bass. We knew of each other 15, 20 years ago. I mean, as soon as the first time I saw her, I still remember that day too. Is at this underground rave called the Dungeon, and it was just a hallway full with doors leading to different rooms. And I walked into one of them, and she was there playing. Short little girl, long black hair. It's like, who is that? And one of my boys told me who she was, and that was I just always kind of kept my eye on her through the years, and who she hung around with as far as the people in the scene. But we never really talked, and never really had any type of interaction ever. I just kind of always was creeping from back behind the scenes and whatnot, even when I had girlfriends, to be honest.
When you first described her there, like going into like that thing, I don't know if anybody else thought of it, but I thought of Wayne's World. Like when he's seeing what's her name, and it's just like the sparkle going, it's just like they lock eye.
I'm not gonna lie, that volatile relationship I was telling you guys about, I was actually in that relationship when or breaking off with that when I finally got to like link up with Mercedes. And the funny thing about it is my ex actually called me out. She's like, "You've been fucking eyeing her for years, haven't you?" I was like, yeah. I'll be honest.
Oh, really? So was it like instant connection when you guys finally did like start talking, or was it something?
Oh yeah, I mean it was instant, obviously, right off the bat with the music.
Did you guys ever collaborate and like produce anything together, or was that just
I actually
something that brought you together?
I actually have a couple of tunes that I never finished that I was working on with stuff that she made, that she worked on with her ex-husband. Last time I touched those was probably 3 or 4 years ago. They're definitely Southeast Asian influenced. Her family spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, and she had nannies in Singapore and whatnot. So she's really keen to that type of music. So I think it was either that or it might have been Indian, like not Native American, but East Indian type of like. It's hard to pinpoint the melodies and sounds that it was from, but They were good stuff. I got to finish those. Thanks for reminding me, actually.
Absolutely, man. It's so cool what you pick up as a kid, and like how much those little things can have impressions, and then something that would appear foreign to other people. It's like no, I'm really comfortable with this. Like I understand these sounds, so I that's super cool.
Yeah, with her and me. Aside from that, we clicked with the music. We clicked. I mean, I clicked a lot with her because she was totally different than the females that I was used to. She was traveled. She was experienced. She's. I mean, she's older than me, which is always seemed to be the case with females
How much older?
that came around. She's 3 years older than me, I believe. I'm 37, going to be 38 this year. So 2 years. I don't want to say she's over 41 or over 40. She'd kill me. So yeah, 2 years.
She's 39.
There you go. But yeah, it was that. I mean, the cannabis came later, obviously, because I didn't know she grew when I met her. I didn't know she was she had a garden. She did her own thing like that. That came after the fact. So it was mainly just the music and the vibe that we got. My itch to want to travel and see the world and experience life. Because prior to her, I was in the Bay my whole entire life. I think I left California twice, to Oregon and then to New Mexico to see family from both sides of my parents, and that was it. I'll actually take that back. Miami once for Winter Music Conference, but never been out of the country, never been to any other crazy states or like anything outside of the West Coast except for Florida. And I met her. Next thing you know, I'm going to Croatia and going to Mexico and going to all these other places. Like, okay, this is what's up. This is why I dig you. I vibe with you,
That's so awesome.
What was it like, your first experience outside of, I would say, North America? Because
that would be Croatia, and that was for
but was it mind-blowing? I almost feel like
oh my God,
an extreme bonding moment, because like,
well, yeah, that was our first experience to like try to see how we travel together, how we're gonna work traveling, because that'll make or break a relationship if you've never done it before. And just go on, like we did I think 11-hour flight starting out. Went to Switzerland, and then went down to Switzerland to Croatia. And that was my first time out of the country with her. And it was a big 3-day festival. We stayed out there for about a week or so. It's all drum and bass festivals. They had 7 or 8 stages that were all playing different styles of drum and bass and dubstep and grime music and so on and so forth. So it was a trip, to say the least. And then doing acid for the first time in a different country. Also, behind the wheel was pretty interesting. That was an experience and a half. There was a lot of firsts in that trip alone.
That's awesome.
How long did you guys go for? Was it like a week or 2 weeks?
It was about a week. We went. So it was.
That's a sink or swim. That's a sink or swim trip, eh?
Yeah, there's a lot that can go wrong, and luckily we worked out pretty well. It was a festival called Outlook. They actually had their opening ceremonies in Roman Colosseum, one of the only still fully built Roman Colosseums. So just getting to go out of the country, and then first thing first, we go to this Roman Colosseum where I'm touching the walls of like, I guess 1,000-year-old rock that people have, shed their blood on. And like standing on this ground was definitely interesting. And then after that, we went to the fort where they had the rest of the show, the event. And it was a 400-year-old fort in Croatia. So that was spectacular as well. It's definitely something that I'm planning to go and do again sooner than later.
I've heard parties like that in other countries. Like I had a friend that lived in Israel, and he used to go to parties like that. And it would be like 3 days, everybody bring a tent, and it was just like you were in like this valley or something, and it was just like intense like music and partying and like the best time ever. And like
they don't do festivals out here like they do in Croatia, or not in Croatia, but just in Europe in general, in the UK. It's totally different ball game. Like the headliners that we think of in the States are opening out there. Like their whole entire roster is just headliner after headliner after headliner, as far as Americans are concerned, or anybody from North America for that matter. And out there, they're just like everyday Joe Schmoes. It's a trip, but it was definitely an experience to have. I recommend everybody trying to do that at least. And same thing with like Burning Man. I got into Burning Man after I met my wife. She'd been going for 10 years before I showed up. So she's coming up on her, I think, 16th or 17th year of going to Burning Man.
So, in other interviews, you chat a lot about the goals you have with your wife of sailing the world and allocating a lot of time to being on the water. Where did that goal come about? Was that something? Was that a vision that you and your wife came together for, or was it something from your childhood?
I actually had never even contemplated sailing ever until I met her. I mean, I've seen people sail. I've boats out. There's boats out the Delta where I grew up. You can sail out there. It never really crossed my mind about me actually doing it and taking it up. Then I met her. She gave me her father's backstory. He was an old school pirate, legitimate. When I say pirate, in all forms of the definition, pirate. He used to transfer a lot of Thai stick and hashish from this area. I love how Siri keeps popping up and recording what I say. That's not good. Siri can shut the fuck up right now. Oh, she's back. Sorry about that.
Always listening.
Dude, seriously. So yeah, she grew up partially on a sailboat. Like I said, she had nannies in Singapore. She was always on a boat in some way, shape, or form with her mom and her dad. Her dad was been sailing since he was a teenager, from what I understand. I never got to meet him. Unfortunately, he passed away in prison in Indonesia after spending 18 years there for the hashish and Thai stick that we just spoke of. It's a little bit of a long, convoluted story, but to break it down, it's a movie. It's literally a movie. When my wife Mercedes explained it to me, I was like, "You're full of shit." I mean, it sounds like, a different version of Blow, or something like that.
Hectic.
It was intense. I mean, he had one last job to do, and I don't know all the details. I usually like her to talk about it, and it's always hard for her to do so, obviously for obvious reasons or whatnot. But long story short, he had one more job to do and went and did it and never came back. And the DEA was looking for him in Southern California. He dipped out, handled this business, got caught up in Indonesia. And obviously that is the largest Muslim country in the world, per capita. You can look it up. It's pretty crazy. I had no idea that Indonesia had the most Muslim
I didn't even
people.
realize they were that big.
No, they're not, but it's just the amount of people there majority are Muslim, and it's the mostly populated Muslim country.
And they don't fuck around.
No, he's lucky he didn't get the death penalty, but they locked him up. And to kind of compare and contrast, if he was in America, he probably would have spent 5-6 years in prison for what he did. But since he was in Indonesia, he couldn't get extradited or anything like that. He was stuck there. And she went and got to see him a couple of times. I think 2 or 3 times while we were together. And about the last year, which was, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, she was working on getting him out. She got his visa and got all that stuff, all the paperwork lined up with the embassy out there. And he fell ill and got sick a month before he was supposed to be released. We had his plane ticket, his everything set for him here. And the thing that he talked about mostly before he passed to Mercedes was that when he got home, he was going to teach us how to sail. So, and that was one of the things that Mercy said when I first got together with her, is you're going to have to be into sailing, you're going to need a passport, and you're going to have to love cannabis because I grow cannabis. I think those were the 3 things. It's like, I'm down for it all. Let's go. And sure enough, her dad was supposed to do that with us.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he didn't get to do that. The trippy thing is when we got our first sailboat, it was a 23-foot sailboat. Little tiny thing. We came across this thing, and it's a couple $1,000 for it. And we didn't really have the cash at that moment in time. And as soon as we were going to go to check it out, Mercedes got a deposit from her father from his pension, I believe, or from whatever he had from Social Security. She got a Social Security check, like literally the day before we were supposed to go and check out this boat. Like, it was a sign. If you believe in juju and good karma or whatever it is, to her it was a fucking sign. and it obviously was meant for us to get the boat and start this journey. So we went and got the sailboat. We learned how to sail on Tahoe, did our thing there, and then upgraded just recently. But well, we got trained, we got certified, American Sailing Association in San Diego, certified up to charter up to 50-foot sailboats.
Oh, cool.
And then we spent a few more years kind of just grinding on YouTube, watching all the YouTube channels that are the sailing channels. Obviously, with my mechanical background and whatnot, I kind of already knew the mechanical systems and electrical systems on boats, just like they are in motorhomes and cars.
Yeah.
So that was kind of
Now,
came.
Were you a
second
mechanic
nature.
or a transmission mechanic?
I pretty much did everything. I mean, I did basic mechanical work at the beginning. I did a lot of lift. I worked in lift kit shots, like lifting trucks, lowering trucks, and cars and things of that nature. Got into transmission R&R, which is remove and replace. I never really built transmissions, but yeah, I mean, like I said, from 15 all the way up to, I guess, 5-6 years ago now, all I ever did was automotive. That's all I knew, aside from graffiti, art, and music. I didn't have a normal job. Didn't sit at
I
a
wish
desk.
I wish I was that comfortable around an engine. Then I would, hopping on a sailboat would feel a lot more comfortable because, like, okay, I can figure out how not to drown. But like,
Yeah, I mean,
if the engine starts fucking up and there's no fucking, and I don't know how to really sail, I'm just learning. Like, okay, now I'm fucked.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely, there's definitely a learning curve nonetheless. I mean, we're still like now. So we got this bigger boat. We have a 52-foot sailboat in the Bay Area. We just got it a few years back. The owner of the boat's named John. My wife's name is John. Once again, she thought there was some weird connection. He's also a Zen Buddhist as well, and her mom is Buddhist as well. So everything kind of just aligned with this boat, and we got a really good deal on it. So now we have a new home in Sausalito, California, which is a 52-foot sailboat. It's a Tiana center cockpit cutter rig, if anybody knows on chats or whatever what that is. It'd be way too much for me to explain, but it's a beautiful boat. It's got a few things that need to be worked on, but it was just felt like the time was right for getting that boat, and now we have the chance to kind of learn on such a boat that's double the size of what we initially bought and invested in, and spend some time on that in the bay. But yeah, going back to the beginning of it, like when she talked about sailing and we got this little tiny 23-foot boat, I was like, yeah, I could do this shit all day. And then we started watching these channels and seeing, and she's like, I want to do that. I want to go blue water crossing is what it's ocean. We need an ocean boat, a blue water crossing boat. That was a lot to take in because me and her are both only child. Her mom's still around, obviously. Her dad's passed. My parents are still around. And I mean, they're not getting any younger. So we're trying to, and my mom doesn't fly because she's got health problems that kind of keeps her from that. So it's not like I can go and sail somewhere and go to a different country and have her fly out. Kind of impossible. So, oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, that looks like one of them. Yep, that's a cutter rig. Looks like a center cockpit. That's what our boat looks like, pretty much.
That's very cool.
But yeah, that's kind of the sailing thing. That's what I now have two passions. The car thing, I'm always going to love cars and automotive and classic cars and things of that nature. I can go on and on about automotive, but I lost ambition and I lost drive for that career real quick when I just constantly got bombarded by people who would come to shops that weren't happy, because obviously their car broke down. They're not going to be stoked about that. The last couple of shops that I did get to work in, people would come in with, stacks of money because they wanted to do something cool with their cars. But I just slowly lost the passion for it. And I can kind of say the same for music as well, to a certain extent, when it all started turning into this shit, all the digital stuff and the controllers and Serato. I grew up with vinyl, so I was a little jaded. That's another term that we like to use in our junglist community, is jaded junglist. Yeah. We're kind of set in our ways. But cannabis, when that came around, and my boy Matty Bubbs showed me rosin. I mean, I already knew as I was already helping my wife grow and whatnot, but then we got found in the concentrate stuff. I never looked back. I had no desire to continue doing automotive stuff.
How was that finding out about your wife having that conversation with you about her cultivating? Was it an I'm all in, and you were just diving in and learning as much as possible, or was there a slow evolution of getting involved in the cannabis scene?
Well, to go from the start from the very beginning, I guess when me and her got together, I used to have this saying with my buddy Arson, "Dirty hands, clean money." Um, it wasn't a jab at anybody in particular. Like I owned my own house when I was 23 years old, and I had my boys. It was kind of a spot where I would have my boys come and live with me to kind of get their head right, and like if they had drug problems or whatever, they'd come to my house, reset, and then hopefully go back out and be a normal person. But I also had people coming out, and they'd have 10 packs underneath their bed. I'm not going to name names on any of them or whatnot, but I was around the cannabis from an early age, and smoking flower as a teenager or whatnot. I did all that. But as far as me and Mercedes, she saw that and that motto, the dirty hands, clean money, and me being automotive and like never really seeing me around any type of illicit activity or whatnot. So she thought I was a little bit more straight edge. So she asked Arson, she's like, "Is he going to trip on me having a garden?" It's like, and she's like, he's like, "Pretty much, no, you're good to go." So I didn't really know she had one, I think, until I actually came to her house, and she took me down the road to check it out. I was like, "Wow, okay, I see what you're doing. I like this. What's up?"
I feel like if I ever met a girl, I'm married and my girl does help me though. But like, if I ever met a girl when I was younger like that, and like she brought me into a girl, I'd be like, "Will you marry me?" I remember having conversations, and Jameson and I have had this conversation before, like when he was last time in town, and I've ended good relationships because one of the girls, she was like, going to medical school, whatever, and she's like, "Would you stop smoking so much weed?" And I was like, "Nah, I think we're done." That was it.
Sorry, I'm out of here. Yeah, and she barely even smokes. I mean, like I mentioned, she has pretty bad asthma and things like that. I mean, she just loves growing the plant. She's got a good a good green thumb.
Does she not consume it in any way, shape, or form?
No, she does, just very, very seldom.
Was there ever
she can't really handle dabs or whatnot.
Any of that?
What's
like,
that?
Was there ever any rudimentary like hash making? Even like do you guys have finger hash around or anything like that, or like was it just
maybe from
just flowers?
Maybe probably from the trim bins during trim scenes, but that was really about it. There was really no concentrated form of it around, at least in our environment, aside from the flower. She's an old school grower. She was taught by an old school grower. She still grows in an old school manner. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's kind of her mentality with it all, which I totally understand, even though like I'm kind of getting more into the newer technology and trying to elevate ourselves and still maintain that OG style of growing, which is kind of tough. But no, there wasn't really too much around until rosin popped around, legitimately about 6 years ago or so.
So talk a little bit. Take us through that when your friend came over and showed you this rosin and the wheels started turning. What the progression looked like from there?
It was pretty quick. I think he showed me Bubble Man's channel, Hash Church, and showed me Phil, Soul Grown Solventless, talking about pressing with a hair straightener and using his foot to smash down on it. And he told me about that. He's like, yeah, people were taking nugs and pressing them and getting the oil from the nugs. I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. What are we using? He said a hair straightener. So luckily enough, I kind of a light bulb popped above my head. I was like, well, I have a bearing press downstairs. I've been working for with automotive stuff, so bearing press made the most sense. I was like, let's take the wife's hair straightener and take it apart and JB weld that bitch to the press and see what happens. Like just going with our hands or our feet isn't enough. So that was my very first press, was a bearing press, 10-ton bearing press or 12-ton bearing press with a deconstructed hair straightener welded to it. And then found out real quick that wasn't going to work. So one of our camp daddies is what I like to call him, from Burning Man, a guy named Joe. He runs Noble Metal Fabrication out here in Grass Valley. I went up to his shop and he made me a set of plates. Made me a set of aluminum plates, like 3x5, weird, awkward size. And I got a PID controller from like MASH 710, I think what it was. I don't even know if they're around anymore. Ordered that thing out, hooked it all up to the press, and started pressing flower with that initially. Because I mean, I didn't really know how to even make hash at that point in time. I knew about hashish, I knew about traditional hash, obviously, and Thai stick and Moroccan hash and things of that nature, but never really thought about extracting it or understanding how to at that point in time. So Maddie got over it pretty quick, because one of our first attempts to press, I didn't realize that the controller was way hotter than it was set to, because it was a cheap China controller and it was in Celsius. And I set it to 80 degrees Celsius, which should be like 180, 190, somewhere around there. And come to find out, it was at like 280, 300 degrees. And we put the flour in there, squished it, and it just like popped and sizzled and splattered all over the place. And it was just black tar that came out. I think some even got on Maddie's face. And he's like, "Nope, I'm done. I'm cool." He didn't have the patience for it, which is fine. I understand it, but I did. So I kept wanting to pursue it. It's like, I know I can dial this in. I understand the concept. It makes sense to me, and I understand what the reaction is that's happening. So let me see if I can dial this down. I sure enough was able to dial down that controller, but eventually ended up getting a a Dake 10-ton tabletop press, DAKE 10-ton, and getting a set of lid extraction plates. He's actually from Canada as well. He's no longer in existence, from what I understand. He was that was a touchy subject. He was kind of MIA for a while, but in the plates, some of the heater elements on it cracked, and it took him like 3 to 5 months to get new heating elements. He was one of the first guys I saw that would constantly dab online, like one of the big, just like all his stories were him dabbing, and then somewhat talking about his plates. So I sold the plates off because they just weren't what I was looking for, and then ended up getting, I got the low temp. And this all happened within a couple of years. But from the flour, after that we had that issue, we even tried pressing wet flour, like straight off the bud flour, or off the stem, which was...
Describe to me that process.
Waterfalls everywhere. Like every direction, just waterfalls of like purple water, and really little to no rosin. It was a shit show, let's put it that way. So I learned real quick not to do that. I was like, well, I need to figure out how to get this oil off these flowers. And my boy Dustin at the time was like, well, you can get like 5-gallon bucket, put your material in there, and put a drill with a paint mixer in it, and just smash that shit. And there's these things called bubble bags you can get. And it was kind of a wrap ever since then. The rest is history. I figured out where to get the bubble bags at. Can't remember my first set. I've never owned Bubble Marcus, the Bubble Man bags.
I think you said on like another podcast it was the Bubble Man guy or whatever.
Yeah, I think I got the Bubble Guy once.
Bubble
Bag Dude.
Yeah.
Whatever was on Amazon at that time. Yeah. I think that was my first kit. Learned real quick that those were shit, so I saved up for the ice extracts bags. And those are the ones that I use currently to this day. Still have my original pair from a few years ago, because I have multiple sets of bags that I kind of work.
Do you want to talk about
through.
why those other ones are shit, and why because I don't think we've ever talked about it on the show.
Yeah, so
but like it's so obvious to hash makers and people that have made the mistake.
Bubble Bag Dude's bags, he uses a really inferior product, and what ends up what people finding out is the micron's way off, either upwards or downwards. It'll be for example, you have a 73 micron bag, and it might actually be an 80 or 85 or a 60 or 65, and it's just the quality of the bags and the micron mesh that he uses doesn't hold up. And if those sizes are off, you're always going to have inconsistent heads in different bags, or losing heads in something that you weren't going to keep, or degrading your product because it's not getting filtered the right way. The same goes the same for anything that you get on Amazon, or any inferior, cheaper products that might look quality initially. A lot of the bag companies on Amazon per se are not the best, unless, I mean, when it comes to work bags, like the zipper bags that you put material in to wash in, those can be a little off, up or down, usually 220 microns. So, I mean, if they're up a little bit or down a little bit, that's not too much of the end of the world. But yeah, that's kind of the difference. And like compared to ice extracts or Marcus Bubble Man or bolt bags or even Rosin Evolution now, they all use a higher quality mesh that they're quality controlling as well and testing. And like now with the growth of like macro video and macro pictures and whatnot, you can actually dial those in and check and see how your mesh is doing, or if it's the proper size, so on and so forth. So
I was just about to say the consistencies I've seen under microscopes, it's ridiculous. You look at a nice extract bag, and even the way that it's weaved,
yeah,
it's unreal.
Yeah, it's that's why I like Rosin Evolution. I mean, he's got an affordable bag sets, and don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure he told me one of our first conversations that we had when we met in person, that he used to work in I know for a fact he used to work in like skydiving and paragliding industry for nylon and things of that nature. And I think he even has patents in nylon fabrics. So he understands the material a lot, like probably a lot more than other people who are actually making bags as well currently. Which is why I use his bags, his press bags, and I also use his wash bags as well.
We're jumping ahead a little bit, but what is your washing methodology, Nick? Are you a hand washer with a paddle, or are you using machines?
I started out doing using the machines, the 20-gallon Bubble Magic wash. Well, initially, like I said, I started using the paint mixer and buckets, which was a horrible idea. I learned quick not to do that. I also learned that on Bubble Man's show as well. I learned a lot of my shit by watching his Hash Church. And also starting to just kind of pick people's brains who would answer questions of mine, just like people do nowadays. But I did the machine washing for a while. I had 3 of those machine washers, all modified. And then I learned about the hand washing technique and how you can have a lot more control, obviously. So I decided to go and grab a couple 20-gallon, 32-gallon vessels or trash cans and a paddle, and slowly started to kind of understand the concept of hand washing and kind of ditched the machines altogether. And then since then, I've upgraded to a stainless steel vessel by S9 Steelworks out of Michigan. And he made me a custom 44-gallon stainless steel vessel with a swage lock ball valves and tri-clamps and all that, all the quality stuff.
I saw you post that today or yesterday.
Yeah, that's
my God, that thing is beautiful.
It's awesome. I love it.
Steel.
Yeah, he does a really good job. He's a mom and pop shop as well, so that's one of the big things that I push on is to supporting and helping mom and pop shops that are on the same level as me, because that's kind of what I consider Rakkems. We're definitely mom and pop.
S9, you're saying?
Yeah, S9 Steelworks with a Z.
Yeah.
You remember your first dab, Nick? Like, was it something memorable, or is it something you can't even,
I think my first dab was some of that black tar I was talking about before.
That you had pressed out for the time?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was it.
That's really cool that, your first experience was actually something that
you skipped the whole B.A. Joe
Yeah.
craze and you saved yourself, like you saved your health.
Yeah, I didn't even know about BHO until after I learned about hash and how to wash hash, how to wash flour into making hash. I didn't know about extracting with solvents. My buddy Matty Bubs used to do that shit at his house. He'd blast with the glass columns in fucking doors like an idiot. I love you, Matty, but that was dumb. And he learned quick to not do that after seeing what people were doing to themselves, and that to me too also involved a lot of chemicals and explosion shit, and I'm not trying to have that anywhere around me or my family. So
did you go out? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, and also like learning the fact of how much, like especially back then, the fact of people not being able to purge their shit right, like you never knowing the quality of butane they're using or how much they're leaving behind, so on and so forth. So it became a turnoff really quick. I respect their people's process and the way that they do their stuff with solvents nowadays, but it just wasn't my steez.
We've come a long way since then.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
So were you immediately drawn to like go out and find a good example of that product to try to know what you were striving for, or was this something you kind of just did yourself and continued to improve and follow the improvement
Yeah, I mean the first real dab that I tried, it's like that was actually on the shelves at a dispensary, and this is obviously before Prop 64 in California, when anybody can just take their product to a dispensary and put it and get it bought and put on the shelves. But about a half gram of soil grown solventless is rosin for $80, a half gram at the dispensary, and I tried it and it was amazing.
Rosin?
No, I don't think it was flower rosin. Pretty sure it wasn't, but I don't know if he was releasing flower rosin to dispensaries then. But very well probably could have, because that was kind of the beginning of it all. And it was amazing.
Was that expensive at one point?
Yeah, I was like, as I left, I'm like, I'm never buying a gram of rosin from a dispensary ever again if it's going to be this price. But I wanted to see what I was working with and what I had to compete with, I guess you could say.
Absolutely.
And I didn't really look at Phil Soil Grown Solventless as competition, but more so as somebody that I can look up to and reach that level at some point in time.
Where's the bar at?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
like he was the bar. So I found his stuff, tried it out, and I had a shitty. Actually, I still have this rig. This was my first rig. It's like this banger cost more than the rig, and yeah, it's. But I smoked out of this, and was floored. I mean,
I don't know what you mean
Whoa.
by I had a shitty act.
Holy shit! I gotta turn that chick off. Sorry about that. Hold
And
on.
so that was something you were really impressed by. Like that was something that really had an effect on you.
Absolutely, yeah. That was like, all right, I know what I need to strive for. So, but I need to figure out how to wash hash better, and that's when I started to learn I started using our trim from my wife's garden. That was the easiest access to material I could get.
Absolutely.
So, and she, mind you, but back then was growing for flower, so she would dry her stuff for flower, smokable consumption. Not anything else. So she would dry in 5, 6, 7 days, have her flower dried, to a crisp, more or less. So the hash that I was getting from that trim obviously was not ideal, but it worked. It gave me the opportunity to learn and understand and better perfect my craft. And then I started picking up some of our buddies' trim, started watching bigger batches, and then from there is trying to figure out how to dry it better. This is before freeze dryers, obviously. I was doing a lot of air drying. I got schooled on how to air dry and complete the drying process in less than 3 days, under the right circumstances. Shout out to Billy, rosin presser from back in the day. He used to make a rosin press when they first started coming around. He no longer does that now. But he's the one that taught me how to air dry hash, and that was a game changer for me. I didn't know any other way, but besides, grating it on a pizza box. Then he showed me some tech on how to dry it on baking sheets and with fans and parchments and paper and like beach towels and things of that nature. And I had dried hash in about 2 to 3 days and started pressing that. And then once that happened, that was a new level. That happened within my first year. So about 4 or 5 years ago, that took place, and never looked back.
Beach towels, did you say?
Yeah, so to kind of have it make sense. So, like if this was a baking tray, I'd lay a beach towel down on it, and then I'd put a piece of parchment over that, and then I'd sieve the wet hash on top of that in a thin layer, and then I'd put another piece of parchment on top of that with weights on it, because I had little 6-inch fans that would blow directly down onto the baking tray. So the beach towel would act as a wicking agent, pulling the moisture down, and the fans would push the moisture further. And they weren't on full blast, but under the right circumstances with your environmental temperature and your humidity, I kept my temperature underneath 60, 65, kept my humidity as low as I could, and within a day and a half to 2 days, sometimes 3, depending on how thick the hash layers were, my hash was dry and ready to be pressed. It also made the best texture hash I've ever had in my life. I love air dried hash. I hate freeze dryer hash.
I was just about to ask you.
I don't like freeze
What's your
dryer
reason,
hash.
and why did you never make the dive? 'Cause
From
you're like the 4th or 5th person we've talked to that says the same thing.
As far as like freeze dryer hash, it's just the texture, the consistency, the way it feels, the granular aspect of air dried hash. And also, I think there's something to be said about the slight bit of oxidation that happens. Most people understand that as color, how it changes from maybe a lighter hash to darker hash, depending if you're air drying. Obviously, that's non-existent with freeze drying. But freeze dried hash was just like pollen to me. It looked and acted like pollen. But I knew I had to scale up. I couldn't have my space. My space is really small that I work in, and I work by myself, and I couldn't have 2 or 3 or 4 baking racks in my area. It just wasn't feasible. At one point, I had 100 pizza boxes stacked on shelves. I was drying in 100 pizza boxes with the same thing, fans shooting around them and everything. So it wasn't scalable in my location. And the next best bet was the freeze dryer. So I was kind of forced to go in that direction. That's really the only reason why I started freeze drying hash. If I had the means and the ways, I'd still continue to be air drying. But also the volume of product I was washing in a single wash or in a single day, the air drying couldn't keep up with it. So it only made sense to scale up to the freeze dryer.
So you had in your early days, you exclusively worked on dry material. Were there certain things that you picked up on that was remarkably different working with dry material versus live material? Like in the wash bin or in the freeze dryer or on the microplane or at any point in the process?
Well, the biggest thing was obviously the sieving aspect of it, sieving dry material versus fresh frozen. You're not going to sieve fresh frozen. You're not going to put that through a baking sieve more often than not. I mean, with dried hash, the cool thing about it is you could take the patty of dry hash that you just pressed with your hands on a 225 micron screens, slide that patty into the freezer for a couple minutes just to kind of wick a little bit more of that remaining moisture out, pull it out, and it would break up and crumble like wet sand in a sieve. And you just use a spoon, and that would crumble up, based off of your environmental temperature, which is something that I always bring up. You always want to make sure that you're dealing with hash at a lower temperature, colder temperature, if at all possible, especially if you're dealing with greasy stuff. But that was the biggest thing is I learned really quick with fresh frozen that you couldn't sieve it. You had to use a microplaner, which meant you had to freeze the hash solid before you went and did that. There's obviously pros and cons to that. There's pluses and minuses to microplaning. People will argue that it shears heads, which, I mean, you're running against sharp objects. It's going to shear some heads. But the reason that I kind of focused more on dry material initially was because that's all I had. That's all I had available to me. I didn't have anybody fresh freezing their material back then.
Did you notice any subtle differences between dried and cured material?
Depending on the grower, yeah, because I mean, if the grower was not growing for hash in mind, more often than not, it would have a darker resin, a darker oil. Because most of them were growing to full term or even a little bit longer to make sure they get their yields or whatnot. So I learned real quick that a dried material, depending on the post-harvest process, how people harvested, how quick they dried, how long they dried, what temperatures they used to dry at, that all ended up reflecting back in the product that I got, whether it was flour or trim. Fresh frozen, obviously, you're kind of skipping all of that. The only way you can really degrade your fresh frozen, in my opinion, I guess, would be if you had an 8-week strain and you grew it to 9 weeks, and it was a lot more mature, and then you harvested for fresh frozen. You have more of a high likelihood to have more amber heads than you would opaque or clear, obviously. So, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just your oil, your trichomes becoming more mature and transferring over to different cannabinoids, which is what we can talk about later. But those are the big differences. With dry material, I learned real quick that I could agitate it a little bit harder than I could fresh frozen because those heads are now a lot more solidified. With that being said, I also found out that I would knock off stalks a lot easier by the harder agitation. So kind of taking a step back and understanding that I can go a little harder, but to remember not to go too hard because then you're just breaking off more contamination. With fresh frozen, those stalks are a lot more viable and stuck to the plant matter to where they won't get knocked off as easy. Obviously based off the fact that they still are retaining all their moisture. The downside is if with fresh frozen, if you don't understand fresh frozen heads, they're like a water balloon. They're not as solidified as your dried hash. So in regards to that, you have more of a chance of breaking those water balloons if you agitate too hard, and also dealing with chlorophyll because of the remaining amount of water that's still in the plant.
So, if you had to make a sweeping generalization about yourself, would you say that you prefer your personal preference to consume a dried product or a dead product versus a live product? If I use Van Gibson's term,
the Jesus rosin. I don't really have a preference. I guess what my preference is that I have what I'm ingesting at that moment in time. I want it to have a proper lasting effect that that is flavorful, and like when it comes to the color and the looks of something. I mean, yeah, something that's like that is beautiful, right? It's amazing, but something that might be slightly darker can be just as amazing. And that's I learned that so quick. Like that stuff right there, you can see how much darker it is. This stuff is so much louder than that other jar.
Yeah.
Like ridiculously louder.
There's a lot of rosin racists out there.
Yeah, there is. I mean, that's unfortunate too, because it's all about education and not people not understanding. I mean, there will be those people who are educated who are just like, they draw a line like anything darker than this I won't fuck with. Yeah. But I mean, I'm not that type of guy. So when it comes to dry material and fresh frozen, live rosin, hash rosin, anything that comes from dry material, I call hash rosin. Anything that comes from fresh frozen, I just call it live rosin. Those are my terms. I know other people say live hash rosin or whatever. But,
okay, speaking of terms, what do you define hash as? Like, is it an all-encompassing thing, or is it a defined term?
Hash are the trichomes. To me, that's what hash is. Hashish are the trichomes, the sugar, the crystals of the plant. That's about as simple as a definition I can get, and that's what I use when I talk to people. Hash, loose resin, same thing. When you extract the oil from that, I consider that hash oil. I try to just keep it dumbed down and simple, because that's what it is. Hash oil is a byproduct of hash, i.e. rosin. And whether it's extracted with, I don't think BHO products or solvent-based products is hash, but a byproduct of the hash from the plant. I mean, you're liquefying all the trichomes, so there's no longer any more solid structure. That's how I define that. It's hash oil. Everything that we make as far as a concentrate is a hash oil from some way, any way, shape, or form. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. Hash oil is rosin, hash is hash from trichomes from the plant. It's about the only way I can describe it.
So in one of our last interviews, we had Buddha on from the Hash Matters, and he was the first person who I have ever heard the term Jesus Tech from. And so I want to shout him out first of all, and second of all, I want to ask you, what experience do you have with a partial cure, or temporary hang and then freeze fresh frozen material? Do you have a lot of?
I mean, I'm pretty sure he heard that partial cure or Jesus Tech thing from me, if I'm not mistaken. It was just kind of a joke, playing a joke on the fact of everybody calling their stuff live rosin, when in fact none of our rosin is alive at any point in time. Even the plant matter that we're washing is not alive. Using the term live to describe that it was harvested and frozen while it was still alive. But as far as Jesus rosin or Jesus Tech or dead rosin, zombie rosin, that's all kind of a play on the post-harvest process once again. So as the post-harvest process is something that I'm kind of writing an SOP for right now across the board, whether it's fresh frozen harvest or full-term harvest or the partial dry harvest. And I've done a few tests in R&D myself with our single source product that we have. I've had a few other friends do it as well with smaller batches just to see how it would turn out. And my final conclusion is pretty much this. It's as far as the end product, you still maintain majority of that live whole plant fresh frozen terpene profile, but you also up your yield more so than your whole plant fresh frozen hash, and not as much as your dried hash. So let's take a GMO for example. A GMO could yield fresh frozen 6, 7, 8%, somewhere around there. Fresh frozen version and dried version somewhere around 20, 25, maybe 30, depending on who grew it and how they grew it.
But
with
you able to do your tests and factor out water activity? Like
that was the one thing that I didn't get to actually dial in the most. That was the big question mark over everybody's head, is how much water is actually being removed in that short period of time. Mm-hmm. But I know it's a decent amount. The one thing I didn't get to do is like weigh a fresh plant in comparison to a plant that's been dried for 5 days in comparison to a plant that's been dried for 12, 14 days. That's the one thing I didn't get to do, but I noticed a big shift in water evaporation from the plant after a good 4 to 7 days, somewhere in that mark. The majority of it is dissipated, but
so someone who's done that test and really has a real strong understanding of this, what are your thoughts on just industry hash yields in general when somebody says, oh yeah, she did this or she did that? I mean, was it grown how was it grown and when was it last watered are two things that I think would have potentially significant effects on true yield numbers when we're trying to use a metric to compare apples to apples from maker to maker. And is that something that you have put any thought into and considered, or do you think that it's a good comparison what we have right now?
Yeah, I think I mean that's definitely something that you have to take into consideration. The time spent flushing the flower before it gets harvested is, I think, the definite importance, especially if you're using salts and things of that nature. If you're using anything that's not organic, and even organic stuff, you just want to make sure you have a good solid flush on that product. I think there's something to be said with the final ending days to a plant and how they're managed prior to harvest. Whether it's fresh frozen, whether it's going to be used for fresh frozen or a partial dry or a full term dry. But going back to like the partial dry, if you take, for example, so what I found out is the fact that I still, like taking the GMO, I still had the loudness and the way that the terpene profile expressed itself while the plant was growing, still encapsulated in the hash that I produced from a partial dry. But I also upped my yield anywhere between, I think it was about 4 to 6%. So something in fresh frozen that would have given me 6% is now giving me anywhere between 12 to 15%.
Now, is it actual physical more hash, or is it just percentage
it's
from
just,
the actual weight?
It's percentage from the weight, because now you've extracted a majority of that water weight. So it's a lot of people. I guess a lot of people who don't understand hash don't understand the fact that with fresh frozen, it's kind of become a common idea or practice that it's about a 5-to-1. So five wet pounds equals one dry pound, roughly. Cuban grower told me 2,250 grams to be exact. Where he got that number from, I don't know, but that's what a lot of people base it off of, is somewhere between the 5-to-1 ratio. So the only thing that I have yet to figure out and dial in is the actual water loss, or the moisture loss from the plant separating it between fresh frozen, partial, and full term dry. But I know there's a difference, and I got Pedro's grow room. He's doing that. He's doing partial dries with all of his material now, and he's had extreme success. It's just it hits different, I guess you could say, because it's still, now the trichomes have given themselves given them chances. You've given them a chance to slightly mature a little bit by hang drying them for a couple days or a week, let's say.
And you're losing some of those volatiles too, right? So
that's another thing too, is that
a little bit of that head fraction that may otherwise stand in the way of some of the other terps. So
Yep.
I like this. I've been saying this for time for my solvent shit too. The three to five.
Yeah,
Well,
you're changing the the molecular structure and how the terpenes
mhm.
are like you're going to off gas your most volatile ones because they off gas at what 65 75 degrees roughly, like your most
Yeah.
volatile monoterpenes. So you're already getting rid of those, and we don't want those anyways because those are the ones that are the most harsh to our bodies and throats and lungs. I mean, we found that out slowly but surely. So there's that benefit on top of the higher yield, and also on top of having somewhat of that. Like my whole goal is to try to get my end product to smell just like it did on the plant, and obviously that's going to be different after drying because your terpene profiles change drastically from fresh on the plant to dry cured material.
So do you have some examples of material that you've worked with, like the same cultivar, fresh frozen, Jesus Tech, and then fully dried? And like what are those varietals and what were your observations?
We had one strain in house that was kind of still to this day a mystery. We got it on the assumption that it was Mason diesel or Amherst diesel. It didn't have any smell or structure like diesel at all. I did a little research and I come to the conclusion that it might have been Cantaloupe Kush. It was just a strain we got from a friend of ours in Mendo, and it was 11-week strain. This thing had grew the biggest structures, like literally like the size of this. It was just out of this world. It was the only downside to it was this 11-week strain, but I got the chance to fresh freeze a batch. I got a chance to partial cure and do a full term. Terpene, that was the one, like you had a question about my all-time favorite strain, then what I would have kept that would have been that strain. But the time frame, which just didn't fit for harvest for the wife. 10, 11 weeks is way too long for her. But it made some of the best product I ever worked with. Fresh frozen, partial, and full term dried. Like it hit numbers across the board every time without fail. From hash yields to rosin yields, and flower yields before all that.
And so like how similar was the fresh frozen once it had fully cured out to the Jesus Tech once it had fully cured out? Like when you were able to finally get it down to apples and apples, and you had a cured out version of each, or even the fresh pressed version of each, like were there distinct things that you noticed different about those three versions of the same thing?
I think the fresh press, well, no, not the fresh press, but the fresh frozen batch and partial batch did give me better yields and better quality hash. The dried material ended up with a lot more stocks, but still gave me, it was probably one of our only plants that we grew in house that gave me a true six star, which I don't ever use that term lightly. Like a lot of our stuff that the wife was produced is not 6-star because, and that's no diss to her, she just never grew for hash. She grew for the flower production and not the hash. But that was one of the ones that she didn't have to really do shit with. And on the plant, this terpene profile smelled like the ripest cantaloupe you've ever smelled in your life. It was just that is the only way I could describe it. And that just got more gassier and gassier as I did the partial dry and the full term dry. So it started to off gas and express itself, and still a sweet melon aroma, but with just this funk on the back end. And the fresh frozen didn't have that. The fresh frozen was like what the plant smelled like on the vine, on the stalk. It was a trip.
Interesting. That's
I missed that one.
Interesting. So let me ask you this: when something new comes in to your lab, do you have a standard operating procedure of the way you go about determining how this or what the final form factor for this material is going to be? Is it something that you're able to tell right off the bat, or do you actually have to take it through its paces to figure out where the best place for this material is?
I mean, if I'm getting something that I'm blind to, that I've never worked on before or processed, if it's just a trim bag or something, usually you can see the trim at the bottom of the bag or the hash at the bottom of the bag. That's usually a nice indicator, depending on how much is in the bag. But all in all, I always like to do at least like a half pound wash, regardless, because that's the only way you're going to really know for sure what you have and what you're going to end up with. The last thing I want to do is take a 10 pack or 20 pounds or 30 pounds from somebody and wash it all, and it all just be absolute shit, and then have to come back to them and be like, sorry, I got low yields and the final product came out dark, and I don't know what I'm going to be able to do with this. And then they're out of loss as well. So I usually like to recommend to anybody that I work with or collab with, if it's not our own product, or even if it is our own product, let's just wash a pound or a half pound. Let's see what we get. If that person can let go of that much material, then I usually do that, and then we see what we get. But now that the mason jar tech has been coming around, that's been a big savior, especially with fresh frozen. It's allowed people to get an idea, not 100% idea, but an idea of what they're working with before they even harvest.
And now we got the rosin dial. Shout out Simply Adam.
Simply Adam with his rosin dial. Can't wait to get mine in the mail. Hint, hint.
I want to ask you about resin mixing or blending and pre and post wash. Is it something that you're a proponent of, and B, have you found a difference blending prior to your wash versus after you've mechanically separated the resin?
So you're talking about like blending two strains together?
Absolutely, yeah.
I was going to say, you've also done on the extreme side of things. You talk quite a bit about you're pulling the THC out of some and then maybe saving the terps.
Oh, we're getting to that.
Yeah. I mean, I've done blended washes before. I've done a few blended washes. I learned really quick, and actually just learned recently that's not the best idea unless you know your cultivars or you've ran those strains prior, because you don't know how they're going to react with each other or indifferently. Separately, you could have one that yields absolutely nothing and the other one dumps, or vice versa, however you want to cut it. So without having the actual knowledge prior to washing the material that you got in your hand, it's a big risk. You're kind of taking a shot in the dark. So what I found out is that you just wash the strains separately. You can keep your micron separate or do full spec or whatever you want, but then you take smaller bits of that final product, whether it's the hash, and mix them together, or the rosin, ideally the rosin because it's easier, and mix those at different percentages, 20 to 80, 50-50, 60-40, whatever, and play with those. And then you can play with a smaller amount instead of washing the whole lot together and getting what you're getting no matter what. Now you have a little bit more control and say so.
Yeah.
So
I think that's gold. Like, I mean, I like to ask that question to everyone, and as somebody who's done a bit of washing myself and a bit of pheno hunting, that, you know, even if they mostly all smell and look great, if you put those extra in for weight, you're gonna end up more often than not. Like, sometimes it just adds to the bulk and it gets put in the wash, but sometimes you'll have one bad apple can really ruin the bunch, and so I think those are wise words, and to be able to take your time and do the extra work and wash it separate, you know, might be a bunch of extra work that you don't want to do, but it might end up with you having a really nice little bit of head stash instead of a lot of, you know, mid-Z rosin.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it gives you it gives you more control over the situation, just like hand washing. It gives you the opportunity to manipulate it the way that you see fit, and like, even if you are hand washing two different batches, now once those two flavors or those two strains, cultivars, are in that wash, there's no turning back. You're gonna get what you're gonna get. So the cool thing about playing with the rosin and mixing those two together, or even three, to make a totally different profile, that gives you the opportunity to have a lot more say so and control on it. I find that a lot more pleasing, you know.
Absolutely. Well, I want to lead into what Brian was heading us to there anyway. You know, mechanical THCA separation. It's something that you really, you know, I'd say carved a space out for yourself in the industry with, and really openly shared a tremendous amount with a tremendous amount of people with. And so for those people who are listening who aren't aware of what mechanically separated THCA is, can you kind of give us a high level overview?
Yeah, so more or less, mechanical separation via the press is the process of the THCA separation. So taking rosin that you've already produced from said hash, you name the cultivar, you have this slab of rosin, ideally a slab, like you can cure it in mason jars, but it's just a little bit more of a pain in the butt to kind of mold and fit how I do it, or this how this process works. But if you can press your rosin, now you have fresh press. Let's say you have 20 grams, 30 grams, whatever. You make a puck out of it and you just let it rest to cure or nucleate, as some people would say. You're allowing it to change consistency, and ideally you want your fresh press to turn into a cold cure or a batter, kind of a crumblier, chalkier consistency, I guess you could say. And what you're looking for in that is that's usually typically associated with a high concentration of THCA. If your fresh press rosin doesn't nucleate in that manner in a short period of time, or it takes forever, it was my experience that there was a lower amount of physical THCA in that said rosin than something that would nucleate a lot quicker. So I learned that. I also did learn this tech from Phil, Soil Grown Solventless. So across the board, he's got the utmost respect from me, above anybody else. I learned a lot from that dude. But he was showing his sticks online, his THCA sticks. Never showed his process, never showed how he made them, did any of that nature. But I took it upon myself to kind of figure it out, and I actually did it on accident my very first time. But going back to the definition of it, you take that rosin and you put it back in the press wrapped in a finer micron than you originally pressed it at. So if you pressed at 25, you use a 15 micron, or if you pressed at 45U or whatever, you'd use a 25 or a 15. Typically, I like to use 5 to 15 micron mesh. I'll wrap it like a Christmas present. I'll put it in there in the parchment in the press, and I bring my press down to about, initially I was doing 90 to 100 degrees. Now I'm up to about 100 to 100 or 120, 130 degrees starting off. And what you're doing is you're physically liquefying the terpene fraction, the high terpene fraction, and solidifying the THCA. The THCA is the acid form, so that it'll crystallize at a certain temperature. And the terpene fraction will liquefy into a translucent, somewhat translucent liquid, depending on, the initial color of your rosin. And you sit it on the press. Like initially, this was a 6 to 8 hour job for even 20 grams, just because I didn't know what I was doing. I would sit at the press for just staring at it, waiting for something to happen. But you'll have the terpene fraction start to liquefy and separate. And as that happens, you slowly bump up your temperature and your pressure to continue to push and separate the liquefied portion from the solid portion. And once you're done with that, and you've refined it and you've done your cleanup process and whatnot, now you're left with your high terpene fraction and your high cannabinoid fraction, which is your THCA. The THCA initially looks like a white chalk, like a sheetrock almost, if you do it right, if you pull it off. Doesn't look like it looks like a very highly illegal substance, let's put it that way. And once again, serious listening.
Could you try?
It's definitely, it was when it first happened to me, or when I first did it, I actually did a second press on one of my bags. I pulled it out, and I had this like white chalky residue on the outside of the bag. I was like, what the hell is that? And I had talked to this guy who was from Elysian Research, who had the first prototype, and I think they patented it, the Drip Tech press. And he was probably one of the first cannabis scientists that I got introduced to. So I started to ask him a shit ton of questions about boiling points and melting points and things of that nature, because I wasn't into science at all as a kid. But now I'm just absolutely like I wish I would have paid attention more in school, because
Extracts does that to you.
Dude, it's like I love the science behind this shit. I nerd out on it. I wish I knew more as far as the language was concerned. So if anybody in the chats, don't freak out if I get something wrong. I'm still in the process of understanding all this shit. But it was a cool reaction that happened. Yeah, see, that's why I like people like you. I need people like you in my life. But hopefully I'm getting this right. That essentially you're left with all your THCA and anything of that nature, your acid forms left behind, and you're left with all essentially your terps and flavor, your color, as your byproduct. And it's not necessarily a byproduct. It can be. if the rosin that you are starting with wasn't viable, was maybe a food grade, I guess you could say. But most often you would reintroduce that high terpene fraction back into the THCA after you've gone further with refining your THCA. So now you have a dried sheetrock looking patty, and what you would do with that is you'd either break it up into little chunks or use a mortar pedestal and grind it down to a powder, or put it back in your rosin press at a super high temperature, like around 300, and then press it and melt it. And what would happen is it would go from that solid back to a liquid, liquefy into a clear liquid, and then go back to a solid and harden into what we call diamonds, which in reality they're not even close to diamonds. They're a crystalline structure. But I'm not going to call my product crystal because that name's already taken. So
I was going to say it's like the sugar sticks.
Yeah, it's like rock candy. Yeah.
But like we're using these colloquialisms to like differentiate, even though they're not right. Like the same, like the live connotation, right? It's not really an accurate connotation, but that's what the market says, and it's what it's familiar with, so we use it.
Yeah.
And same with this, and it is what it is, and
yeah.
Oh well.
So like my stuff, I call my stuff diamond oil. I mean, there's a phrase that kind of stuck. And I hope that's not a name that I really truly like, but there's not much else I can use aside from THCA. Mechanically separated THCA, but then by saying that, people get confused and then don't understand what I'm trying to like either explain or show them. But yeah, once you take,
starting to see a bit of a resurgence, and from my opinion and my point of view, and definitely here in Canada, as well as I'm seeing it in the US, where this diamonds and sauce is kind of becoming popular again. Starting to see photos on Instagram. Do you attribute that to any specific thing, or as somebody who's been in the forefront of this for a while, what do you attribute that to?
Repeat the first part of that question again.
I just see the diamonds and sauce, like the offering of the mechanically separated diamonds mixed with some type of rosin or terp sauce on the solventless side, becoming popular. Something that we're seeing. Rosin Tech's doing one. I've seen, I think West Coast Cure guys are working on some stuff. Up here, I know Van Gyptians just released some stuff with high fidelity. Are you seeing that from your point of view, where that mechanically separated THCA and sauce is becoming popular or more popular, or is that not something?
Yeah, I mean, once more and more people start to grasp the idea of it and how you can further refine your rosin and also turn it into yet again another product made from the same product. That's the cool thing about our industry and what we do, especially with rosin. Like right now, I have this banana kush, and I have it in 4 different consistencies. I have fresh press, cold cure, the jam, and the diamond oil. Like that's the one thing that I like about this is once you get to the mechanical separation and diamond oil part of it, you're pretty much at that. You can't really refine it any more than that. Yeah. You can't really go beyond that until you start mixing them back together to make yet another consistency, like Blue River, for example, and his flan. The flan, from my understanding, is just is a high terpene fraction mixed with a powdered up THCA, and then also I think maybe a cold cure on top of that. Could be wrong though. But just another example is the total breakdown and separation, and then reintroduction on a different scale. I think that's starting to happen a lot more. I mean, there's simple stuff too, like Real Cannabis Chris from my area. He's doing the thumbprints where you got the cold cure and then the rosin, cold cure on the outside, rosin on the center, or the jam rosin on the center. It's I made jokes about it before, and about the thing that I do, especially with the THCA separation, as being a novelty. And initially it kind of was. It's a play on words in a sense, but it's just so hard. It takes a lot to make a little when it comes to the mechanical separation. A lot of people don't understand the value in that or what the purpose is. For me, it was science, first and foremost. It was a cool reaction that was happening. But 2, it gave me the opportunity to continue to use maybe some mids rosin that I didn't have, or that I had, that wasn't viable for the shelves. 100%. For example, what 710 Doctor was saying was the fact that like you could take a mechanically separated rosin, take the THCA that you've stripped all the color and terpenes of, and have that viable diamond structure, crystal structure, sit that aside, and just keep stacking on that, and also have the terpene fraction that might not be viable, that might smell like hay or wet grass or just bad in general. Push that aside and get rid of it. Unfortunately, now you've lost probably half of your product because you've had to do that, but now you've at least turned the other half into a viable product. And then when you do come across other terpene fractions that are viable, now you can play with those, like we were talking about blending rosins before, or you can take one and mix it with the diamonds, because ideally your diamond structures shouldn't have no flavor or taste. I mean, THCA does have a distinct taste to it, but it's in and of itself. More often than not, if you dial in and get it right, those crystals shouldn't taste like the rosin or the flower if you just add the diamonds by themselves.
You just got to know your boiling points, right? If you take it up high enough that it's sub decarb, but high enough to keep it in its like nice THCA state, yeah, you can make it a nice pure THCA. But
yeah,
if
I think
you're never going to get there.
Yeah, I melt my THCA, my raw THCA, the chalky stuff, at around 300 degrees for less than 5 minutes. So there definitely is some decarb going on. We know that for sure. And it also changes the high. I mean, the THCA high is all encompassing, like body, like more so than a quote unquote indica. For me, it's cerebral and body high. Especially when you dab a diamond just by itself. That's the one thing I actually do not like to do, because I don't know if you've ever smoked, anybody who's smoked pure THCA, you get the film on your lips, and like I hate that. It freaked me out.
Talking about that last night.
It freaked me out initially. I was like, what the hell?
Seriously, I never knew what that was until I was listening to you talk about that before, and I was like, motherfucker, that's what it is? Like when we used to hit diamonds in sauce, like BHO diamonds in sauce, and it was like...
That's what made me realize it. I dabbed some BHO diamonds for my buddy, and that happened. I was like, oh, is this what BHO is going to be like? I'm good. I don't like that thing. And then I tried some THCA diamonds, and it did the same thing. It was like, bing, oh shit, that's THCA.
Like, it reminds me of the coating that you get on your lips of resin when you hit a really big bong hit.
Yep.
And it's like that's like the smoke resin though, but like...
Yeah.
It reminded me of the same
though.
thing, and I was like, oh my God, I need to like brush my teeth or peel it off or something.
Yeah. The one thing that I haven't done yet is got any of my THCA separation lab tested. I'm very curious to see how much it's concentrated in regards to that, because if we talk about like a live rosin that, or even a dried hash rosin that might be in like the 60-70% THCA percentile, I can only imagine that if you dial in your THCA properly and you get it cleaned up and refined as best as you can, it's got to be in the high 80s, low 90s. I don't think that us as rosin producers can truly get 100% THCA through mechanical separation. I don't think that'll ever happen.
Centrifuge would be maybe the only way.
But you have to do
like
that
a very high. Well,
that's
yeah,
what
high
that's
RPM
what
centrifuge, and
that's what Blue River's using.
You know.
Yeah, Blue River uses a centrifuge allegedly.
Yeah.
Now, have you ever, or what are your thoughts on potentially making CBD crystals?
I've tried to experiment with it. I feel like the CBDA acid structure is different than THCA acid structure in a sense that it doesn't actually bind and stay solidified as good as the THCA or THCA. And I've only go ahead.
Needs a certain concentration to actually crystallize. So like that's the thing about like doing that is you need it's kind of reverse of the way that we would go at THCA, unfortunately. So
that's what I figured out by actual testing. Yeah, I tried to press some CBD rosin that I made that I buttered up, and it just kind of all pressed through the screens as like a creamy, super creamy, not watery, but super creamy byproduct or end product. It really didn't have any luck with CBDA. I know it's possible, but just like with the means and ways that we have is probably not going to work. That would be something that would be ideally ran through some type of solvent extraction, I would imagine.
So Nick, you shared a really interesting piece of tech on the Hashishin that I'd love for you to touch on again, with regards to the coffee filters, for your final steps in the separation process. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, just go ahead and here, put up my Venmo real quick, and I'll have you guys shoot me some. I'm kidding. No, that's
it's out on the public. I think
I know. I mean, a lot of my shit that I've talked about recently is pretty much is a wrap. As far as the coffee filter tech, it just made sense. So, like, say for example, I have this as my THCA patty. It's still wrapped with the parchment, or not the parchment, but it's still wrapped with the micron mesh. I haven't taken it out. It's still as is. And I've pretty much extracted majority of the bulk of my terpene fraction. Whatever's left over is residual. I probably hit the higher temperature that I originally pressed at. So if I pressed at 180, when I'm separating the THCA or separating the terpene fraction, I won't go over that temperature for the bulk of my terpene fraction, because I don't want to degrade it any more than it already is, because it's getting introduced to heat again, for a second time, possibly a third. So once I hit that point, I take it out and I keep it wrapped in the mesh, but I also wrap it with unfiltered or unbleached coffee filters. I mean, you could use paper towels, anything that's dry and can be used as a wicking agent. I'll double wrap it first. I'll put it in the press and I'll bump the temp up to somewhere between 180 to 200 degrees, and I'll press it for about 5 to 10 minutes intervals, until you'll take the patty out and you unwrap not the mesh but the coffee filter, and the first couple of rounds the coffee filters will look really wet, like they look like they just got dipped in water or oil or whatever. So the further the progression, the further you go with those steps, with those intervals, the less wet those coffee filters will be, for obvious reasons, because it's wicking more and more of that liquid terpene profile out. So I just do that. I'll rinse and repeat.
What's that? The hottest fraction, like hottest boiling point terpenes. That's probably what it does. Or like the terpenes, like sterols, whatever other residual.
Yeah, you're almost getting to the point to where you're starting to,
that's very
to a certain extent, liquefy the THCA as well. At that temperature, at least at 200, you're just on that cusp. So that's why I kind of keep my intervals for about 10 minutes initially, then go down to 5 minutes and just keep going until the filter comes out pretty much completely dry. And I'll even go less than that too. It's just that kind of became my procedure for the cleanup process, and that's the cleanup phase of the THCA. That's to get it as bright white as you can. Other people have figured out how to do it in different manners. I know, like Mendo Budsmith, Covert Extracts, maybe Simply Atom. Or no, I don't think Simply Atom, but who was the guy?
Simpson Solventless.
Simpson Solventless. Yeah, I think they use their press, and by using their press, they'll put their hash, or they're not their hash, but their THCA in a pouch under parchment in the press at a high temperature. And the idea behind that is that the mesh, the super fine mesh, will actually keep back any and all of the color, and it'll produce like a white foam. The THCA will look like a white foam, and that's about the cleanest rosin or cleanest THCA I've seen, besides the way that I do it. The other downside to the way that I do it, though, is I actually melt my THCA once it's done and completely cleaned up on like a hot plate, exposed. So it kind of melts into a puddle. And since I'm doing it at such a high temperature to melt it in a timely manner, less than 5 minutes ideally, any color that is residual in there kind of presents itself and can become kind of darker, because it is essentially decarbing and breaking down. But if you get the cleanup process done locked in, you really shouldn't have a problem with too much color.
That's cool, man.
Those are gold bars, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the color will also be determined too on the rosin that you're putting into the process. Like if you have a darker rosin, obviously it's going to be a lot harder to wick that color away from the THCA than if you had like a super blonde rosin that pretty much has no color going into it already. So initially people would wonder when I did lives and whatnot, I was like, why is your terpene fraction so dark? It's like, well, it's because it was a darker rosin. It's not necessarily degrading it how people would assume or think it is. It's just that's how the initial starting product was. So are obviously,
RJ, with the guys in Michigan, are they reintroducing a terpene for those blue crystals? Is that what they're?
Okay, so like I don't know the chemistry behind that.
No.
So like,
okay, yeah,
it's speculation. Speculation it's a terpene being co-crystallized in the lattice structure while they're doing that. And due to the pH and the type of terpene that it is, it's refracting blue light. And he's dialed it in now with purple and pink. I think the pink is just washed out purple. I am, again, speculating because I don't have the chemistry chops. I do sit beside a dude who I think he's like either a master's or PhD chemist, and he is insanely intelligent. And that guy has some ideas, but we haven't got it yet. But it is some real deal organic chemistry.
Another day, another episode. But Nick,
that shit's interesting.
Oh man, it's got the blue crystals, and how he does that is crazy. I wanted to ask you. You touched a little bit about your feelings and experiences with machine washing, and then moving over to the paddle. As a guy with a big mechanical background, do you feel as though there's a ceiling on machine-assisted, commercialized, solventless equipment when compared to a paddle, or do you feel as though that's something that can be either overcome, or we've already achieved it with the icons and the ice extracts and things like that?
I think they're almost there. I mean, I talked to Ben from Hashatron and Rosin Tech. I think he's like part owner and CEO in some of those companies as well. But I talked to him about the Hashatron machine a while back when they first started getting their things set up, and I saw their lab that goes on the back of a truck in a, I guess it's, what is it, a container, like a shipping container.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I asked him about that one. It's like, what's up with that, dude? Let me get some information. He's like, honestly, I wouldn't even sell this to you. I was like, well, why is that? He's like, the technology, our stuff hasn't met or superseded hand washing craft yet. He's like, pretty much this is for commercial, bulk stuff, not quality, super high grade level hash. But since then, they've improved tremendously, tenfold, and I think they are there now. I think the technology is at the cusp, to be honest with you. I think there will always be something to be said about a hand washing. It could also go totally wrong too if you have the person that is hand washing doesn't understand what they're doing and they're just fucking going to town. You can have repercussions in that regard. But with the technology that Ice Extracts is doing and low temp with their Osprey, everybody that has been putting out these machines is just they're leveling up and one-upping each other every few months with the speeds that they can control it at, the RPMs that you can control it out, the pure pressures access, the way that thing functions with the paddle that has a paddle that comes down and goes around instead of having something that spins from the bottom. I know there's new technology being talked about in regards to having no paddle or no agitator and just using water propulsion to actually spin the material around versus having something mechanical or physical agitating. So I think we're almost there within the next 5 to 10 years that it'll be a wrap for a lot of this industry is when it comes to how much labor is being pulled back from these one-man operating machines and labs.
Absolutely. We've seen, I couldn't agree. Yeah. I mean, I agree with what you're saying.
But there's always going to be a place for hand washing. I mean, when you get down to the craft, the craft size, the small batch, however you want to define small batch or nano batch or whatnot, and there's always going to be something to be said for the hand washing, and it's the roots of it all as well. Like
people want that.
I mean, that's what my Rakkems is an ode to the roots. Even though I didn't come from the roots, I'm giving an ode and shout out to the people who did this shit before me, and this is how they did it. Yeah. So it only felt right for me to continue in this manner. Who knows, if I get my own lab, I'm sure I'll have a washing machine in there of some sort, but I'm definitely going to have some type of brootless system where I'm hand washing as well. Maybe I'll compare the two and see which one levels up better than the other, but in the meantime, I'm hand washing for life. So until my back gives out.
So kind of touching on the diamonds that we were talking about and having that little side convo on, we're seeing a lot of hybridization in the cultivation methodology realm of cannabis. Do you see that same idea applying to extraction methodology? Like, do you see a future where the two methodologies of solvent-based and solventless extraction are combined and put together for a client, an offering to the consuming public?
I've been hearing, speculation of that happening sooner than later. I think people have even tried it. I just don't know exactly who. I've heard discussions pop up here and there in regards to literally mixing the two and seeing what happens. As far as in the processing side of the things, the lab that I worked at previously wanted me to wash hash and then run the plant matter through a delta separation cup to spin it dry with no ethanol to get the water out of it, and then put it in a different cup that had ran ethanol through it to extract the remaining amount of trichomes. It's like, well, that just seems like a lot of fucking work. I mean, I also don't know how water affects butane or solvent extraction as far as like running fresh frozen. RJ, I don't know, maybe you can touch on that a little bit if that's even possible, but I've always wondered.
There's a few things that we can do to like maybe collab in certain ways. I have a couple ideas. I was just trying to find an equation for something we can talk about in the back channel that we can start melding some of the thought processes that we have in the solvent realm with what's going on in solventless to improve and optimize some of the processes that are already going on. Because you guys are in the rudimentary stages where we were with diamond growth 5 years ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now we understand how to make diamonds, and now guys got these crazy diamond structures and things and I'm sure honestly that is totally doable in solventless, and I think we can hack the tech. And honestly, it just came to me during the conversation. So appreciate you, brother, for the inspiration, and we can definitely get this going.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about it. I just don't like. I guess the one thing that I have a problem seeing moving forward is how the end user will receive it, especially when an end user's been using solventless for so long and they have their reasons for, even if they were a BHO user in the past and now they've just strictly put it off and only fuck with solventless. It's like those might be the ones that be like, well, you just ruined perfectly good product. Why am I going to fucking buy that shit? There's once again is going to have to be an education done. Damn, I need to write that down. You want to explain that real quick? It looks like that looks like Egyptian art, hieroglyphs.
Yeah.
He doesn't have his Venmo up. He's got to put his Venmo up for that one.
That's a huge. Yeah, I'm not like I'll take all the Venmos for that.
Oh man, that's cool. So, Nick, what are your thoughts on like the future of dabbing and concentrate consumption in general? Do you think it's going to remain a bit of a niche? Like, and I'm not talking about consuming through vape pens and things like that, but I'm talking about torches or e-nails. Do you think that that's going to grow in acceptance, or do you think that that's going to remain a bit of a niche method of consumption and culture?
Shit, one of my old lab bots is just did his first dab out of a Puffco, first time ever, and he's in his late 60s. And he, one of my old apprentice went over there to check out some of the material that we processed for them, and I got to sit down with him, and he was blown away. So I think that obviously the technology will continue to evolve and grow into who the fuck knows what else. I mean, I feel like the Puffco peak is about like the peak of where we can go with traveling, dabbing, and things of that nature. But
not there yet. We're not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, you got the Indux, if I'm pronouncing that right, the thing that looks like it comes in a fucking flight case type deal. Like that's next level right there.
That's just the best thing I've ever had in my entire life.
I can only imagine. See, look at that shit, dude. Here, let me put my address down. You can send that over. Fucking A.
I mean, price needs to come down a little bit. I mean, it's worth it, but like for more people to get it, it needs to come down.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta understand that that's not really mobile though. At the same time, it is, but it isn't. Yeah. You know.
Yeah.
I honestly think, I mean, you might disagree with me, RJ, that I've had these conversations recently, but the conclusion that we came to is that right now, as it sits, rosin and solventless products are still kind of the minority on shelves along dispensaries and LPs and things of that nature.
Absolutely.
I honestly believe within the next 5 years that solventless will be more than 50% of the shelf space in dispensaries. I honestly do.
I agree, and I think it's been if you like looked at the representation of the what was it, the Prop 215 market in California, and then the pre-legalization market here, concentrates were a way bigger source.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because like your favorite kind of hood dude could just get some COAs and send it to the dispensary.
Yeah,
and that's kind of.
That's what I was doing. I was like when I first started,
right?
215 before 64. I was just able to make my product and then walk right in, just like with my boys with their pounds. And like I had Rakkems on the shelves prior to 64. It was fucking awesome. I had my stuff in 3 different dispensaries in Sacramento area, and it was amazing to be able to come on so quick and be able to have my label sit on the shelves. But I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to probably see more solventless products than solvent products, and possibly more than flower in dispensaries.
I think that's where we're trending for sure. I think the most forward-thinking people on either market on both sides of the border are the ones who kind of are most tapped into their supply, right? So they're less likely to actually go to the legal market to procure their goods because they can't get the volume, they can't get the price or the quality or this, you know what I mean, the service, the deal, you know, the personal interaction, the whatever it is, or you know what I mean. Their favorite people they like to support aren't in the market.
Yep.
I think also the reason it'll grow is the allure of organic and water versus any other material. I mean, if you look at somebody because I think of it as not any of us that are smoking, non-smokers that are going to smoke and they're going to pick up a concentrate, if they have an option and a solventless is at a similar price than a solvent-based, and it's an easy way to do it, whether an mini index sort of thing becomes easier. I think like your organic side of it will make it more successful.
Agreed. If they're at the same price, but I think that it's
similar.
Really hard.
No, because you can pay a premium. I think you could pay a 20% premium. Because if you look at Whole Foods, if you look at everything else, like they sell the same fucking tomatoes, but they sell them for more expensive.
For sure, but we're able to scale things with solvents that like it's going to be really hard to catch up with, and it's exceedingly hard to catch up with. So I mean, like I think there will continue to be 2 distinct kind of markets. You know what I mean? People like I dab BHO, I dab melt and rosin interchangeably. I dab everything as long as like it's good. You know what I mean? Like I don't discern.
Fire.
I just fire is fire. You know what I mean? But I understand what I'm dabbing, and I think that's where a lot of the fear kind of lies. Is like, you know, there's a lot of people not doing it well because they don't understand the process. Jump in.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate. So I will smoke clean, good BHO over dirty rosin 10 out of 10 of the days. And you can clean and make safe things that you cannot clean and make safe with ice and water. And so and anybody who knows me knows I'm the biggest proponent of solventless.
Sure.
And I'm the biggest proponent of solventless. I'm a walking billboard for solventless. But I think that price point wise, it's going to be really difficult to compete with a priced consumer. Like, not the consumers that are watching this show, not the people.
Wait, what does your shirt say?
Hold on. I'm actually getting a little warm, so let me take this off real quick.
Yeah, we got to see this.
Let me put my hoodie on real quick then.
Anti-flower rosin club. Oh, that's so good. Oh, you got one too. Amazing.
Of the hoodie.
Hey.
So,
I knew we were brothers.
That's fucking high.
My point is that I think that both I think everybody's right, but I think both market categories are going to grow. Or the concentrate consumption is going to grow. Solventless will grow in proportion, and they're kind of going to be always brothers that tussle. But the advantage is scale, and not that solventless will not catch up to that, but we're just dialing in quote unquote small scale, like ospreys and things like that. Like those aren't massive scale. Like balance, that's large scale.
Yeah,
Metaphor,
Whistler Tech.
Whistler Tech is larger scale than and is kind of built to scale up a bit larger. So that's the exception to my rule, as there always are exceptions to all rules. But my comment is that the industry, the solvent based industry, is poised and ready with proven technology to be able to produce at scale, and really just only now being given the opportunity and the material needed to do so. And so they've got a competitive advantage and will have for the forever future, as like, my younger brother is never going to be older than me. You know what I mean? So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, Adam kind of just said it right there.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we're all doing the same thing. It's and one thing I say all the time is there's 1,000 ways to skin this cat with every aspect of what we do, whether you're solventless or not. It's remarkable.
That's where I think it's interesting though what you do, because I feel like you're almost bringing the solvent-based people that are into diamonds in sauce, and they're like, "Yo, I don't really want this like soft fucking waxy shit. Yo, they got diamonds in sauce like I smoke all the time. I want diamond."
Yeah. Yo, but they take things like this into consideration. Like there's things like anti-solvents, right? You add it to a solution and it causes like instant separation. So like what if you had a solventless solution that you warmed up to a temperature and prepped properly and added just a micro amount of some anti-solvent, whatever it could be. And then all of a sudden you get like an instant separation or an instant structure change or something you could otherwise not obtain. That would be a benefit. You know what I mean? Like, is that now like taboo? Is that now something that's not desirable?
I think to a certain amount of the community that would be the case, because people are going to be set in their ways,
I've been wondering this question as well, and someone asked it. What are your thoughts on stainless steel mesh screens?
I've used them before.
Is that I was going to ask? Is that what you use when you're doing your taco style, or is it a standard one?
As far as the mechanical separation,
yeah,
I use the Rosin Evolution's 15 micron mesh. I used stainless steel mesh back in the day when I was trying to press flour and then just started pressing hash. The hash I was pressing back then was really inferior and not super high grade, maybe like 2-3 star at best. So it was kind of a pain in the butt to kind of clean those screens and keep them clean and keep them proper. If you know how to use the shit, then they should work just fine. I don't have any gripe against them. I guess I haven't really used the stainless steel enough to come to a final answer on it. I have used them, but just haven't played with it enough.
I feel like as well with stainless steel, depending on how that wire is actually cut and how is it curved, is it triangular, is it square, you may be severing things. This person's also asking, what about wash bags? So now I'm thinking about it as a wash bag as well. The same thing, you may be severing, and for pressing, it does carry heat, so you may actually be adding additional heat. But I would also refer back to Simply Adam as far as what screens you should be using, because he's done a lot of research on, for the rosin tech, or sorry, for the
resin dial.
What kind of screen do you put in that? Do you put a stainless steel one where you look under the microscope, it has that? Do you get a cutout from a bag? And it's, his research on that has been interesting. I think that's why we're all waiting for it to come out and like so excited, because it's like he's kind of looked into that and actually manufactured something that should be.
What I would like people to what I would like people to do a little more research on, and I don't know if it's out there yet or not, is like why we're using the microns we're using. Now, there's been talk about it. I mean, we can go on, like, and one of the simple thing is like with Bubble
Whales
Man.
photography.
Yeah, dude, their shit is the best. But like Bubble Man, for example, he said he did a 73 micron because that's when he was born. Has
Did he
nothing to do
really?
with
I did not
hash.
know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't know that either.
That's the reason he used the 73. It was the year he was born. Now that being said, like we all agree on the microns. You have a 25, 45, 70 or 73, a 90, the 104 now, the 120, 150s, 160s, 190s, 180s. Like I can't imagine the cannabis plant just growing those specific heads. And we also need to understand that when we say a certain micron, like a 90U, it's not just 90U heads. It's 90U all the way up to the whatever bag you had above that. So if it's
Well, it's really 91.
exactly that, even that, I used it. I used mine as like, because it's the size of the bag is 90, right? So are the 90s getting dropped into the 70 bag, or are they being held back by that 90U opening? So
And
it is a 91.
This is where I love the science of it, because I'm dying, and it's right here. It's called Narugo, and it's this little tiny microscope you can clip onto your phone, but it's for like the older style phones. So it's got a prism in the back, so it actually highlights, or it actually like glows all the way around. And check this shit out. You go into their app, and it's got this tiny grid, and you can
Oh, wow.
quantify now your pictures.
Oh,
So
fuck.
my thought is, I go up and I walk up, take some pictures of a bunch of these trichromes, and in the app, I'm literally measuring. And I think that's like the best way. Like, let's use the technology. We have our phones. There is attachments for creating microscopes, and there's ways to quantify. And like, once you zero in that camera within that app, you can now decide exactly. Someone said the head size. Like, you decide what the size of the head is. Not only that, is it, and that's actually how I've harvested recently. Is it partially, clear? Is it fully clear? Is it, fully cloudy? It's amazing.
Yeah, I've been curious, very, very curious about the micron sizes and why we use those specific sizes. It's like a lot of us tend to not keep the 25 micron. Why? Because the physical amount of oil is so much lesser than all the rest. So it's more just like a membrane, a cuticle, and no oil or very little oil.
For high THC strains, there's typically not much good there. It's all fractured stalks and stuff like that. For CBD strains, that's where you're going to start getting a lot of your goods. So just
good to know. Yeah. I mean, it's a question that I bring up a lot lately and try to get other makers to answer to see where their heads are at when it comes to, like, why don't we have a 65 micron or 80 micron versus a 90 and a 70 or 73? Like, is there a specific reason for that? Why are all these companies abiding by those microns and not experimenting with other microns to see where their hash lies in a more optimal situation?
I'm just reading Simply Adam's comment because I'll listen to
And that picture, the picture in the background, I used a macro lens on my phone to take that picture, and that was dried. Those are dried. Those are dried heads from the GMO I did, I believe. It was a 4-week dry, so it was a 2-week dry and 2-week cure, and then I washed them, and that's what I got.
Wow.
I thought that was live.
What was Adam's comment? Brian, can you pull that back up?
Wait.
Weave and mash, multiple different kinds of weaves. So if you don't choose the right weave, it won't.
That's what I was saying.
Same way, interesting.
Adam's really done the research on that and looking at it under the microscope, and that's why I say, like, I need to pull out my old phone because the prism's meant for an old phone, and that's what the app's for. But like, having that available on the go, I think would be really great. And as you said, Nick, it doesn't really always have to be a 90U, because if you walk up to this plant and you're looking at these giant colas and you're taking these pictures and you literally have, a micron range, and you're like, yo, that's a 150, or that's like a 65, and like, you're going through and taking a bunch of pictures and those are all 65s, and you're like, oh shit, okay, I got to adjust it.
that can give you a step ahead of the game too, because then when you're going to wash that material, then you don't need to have certain bags or do need to have certain bags. That's one of the reasons why I like to recommend everybody when I go and teach and talk at classes and whatnot. If you're running material for the first time, run all 8 bags, just at least for your first wash. Run all 8 bags. See where your heads lie. Then that'll show you that if there's nothing in the 90 micron bag, we'll take that bitch out. That's less work for you. If there's nothing in the 120, take that out. Maybe, or keep it in just to make sure that you don't get any plant contamination below those heads, so on and so forth. But you can always reintroduce that hash together how you see fit after the fact by running all 8 bags, at least for your first or second wash. If you're just running specific bags, you can never separate that hash again. So that was one thing that Marcus Bubbleman taught me. It's always smart to at least run all your 8 bags a couple of times to see where your heads lay. And then after the fact, if you want to make a full spec, make a full spec. If you want to do a partial mixed micron, then you can do that. Like, it's just like mixing the rosin before you mix the wash. You can always put together. You can never take apart unless you're mechanically
I think of that as like you're doing the work the first time rather than seeing if it comes out as not what you want. Like,
yeah, working smarter, not harder.
Yeah, put the work in the first time. You're not going to do it every time, but then you know what you're doing. Like,
and especially moving forward. Yeah, moving forward, if you're working with a specific farmer, if it's not single source, and you're working with that farmer and they're growing the same genetics constantly, that then you know by running all 8 bags and you know where their heads lie, more than likely their next batch that you get from them is probably going to be around the same lines. So you don't have to go and jump through all those hoops again. You can just run the bags that you want to run for that specific batch, and you're good to go.
Yeah, so that ding was me texting Jameson. I dabbed that at 470, which is typically a little bit lower than I dab BHO. And it was like still, a little bit more of a puddle behind, but it was still very nice. So usually I'm like 500.
Of what? What is that? What did you dab? Rosin or melt?
No, some BHO that I made.
Oh, so you're not torching your lung?
Well, I mean, like it depends on the banger, but up to 550 is usually okay.
That's when I lift up my bong is at 550, and then like wait a few seconds.
I love how everybody has their own little mannerisms about how and when they dab.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
a personal thing. So Nick, you talked in one of your last interviews about working pretty closely with that Steelworks company. Are you still collaborating with them a little bit and doing some work for them?
Are you talking about S9 Steelworks?
Yeah.
We didn't really. I mean, the thing about them is the Michigan guys and Covert Extracts, Ghostbuster Farms, S9 Steelworks. Shout out to all of them. I mean, me and Covert Extracts kind of helped each other go back and forth with the mechanical separation. And I helped him dial in his product. He helped me dial in my stuff. We also went back and forth with the Jam Tech when like Rosin Ryan started coming out with all of his. And I can't remember the other guy's name, Diet Funk. But they kind of came out of nowhere. They came out of left field. After me and Covert were going back and forth, Ghostbuster hit me up and was like, yo, I really want to show my support and thanks for you helping us out over here out in Michigan. Hit up S9 Steelworks if you need any stainless steel wash vessels or whatnot, and I'll get you sorted out with that. And I hit him up, and they were able to make me one like within a month, I think, and ship it out for a fairly reasonable price. And I was super thankful. These are guys that I've never met. I've only talked to them through social media and maybe on the phone, and for them to kind of take that and respect it and show their gratitude by helping me out with getting this vessel was a fucking game changer for me, because like I said, I was just in garbage cans before that and in washing machines.
That's like driving a Toyota Corolla and somebody just fucking handed you a Rolls Royce.
I mean, essentially, dude, I'm still to this day so grateful for them, but that's kind of like the other side of me working with S9 Steelworks is just trying to get one of my friends named Gabby. She's Miss Celsius on IG. She no longer does the wraps, but she was making wraps for the machine washers and started to work with S9 Steelworks. Was like, you need better wraps. I got a girl that does wraps for $1 million ethanol extraction machines for a company called True Steel, I mean, she'll be able to make amazing wraps for you if you want to do that. And they worked together and collabed and worked for a while. She recently just had a baby, so she's not really pursuing that path anymore. But they did some great work together, and that made me happy. So I think that's pretty much the gist of our relationship. And aside from the fact that I promote his product as much as I can because it's working well for me.
But the community and the vibe, I like that. It's refreshing to hear that there was some reciprocation. Jameson and I have talked about this quite a bit, and it's like to hear that you got to work with good people and got good things to come out on both ends is just like, yo, the world is still a little bit good. Like, fuck, I'm so happy to no, like for real, man. Like that's great, like amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there's still common courtesy and human dignity on the planet. And that's kind of what I search for. I mean, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, I'm in no competition with anybody that's another maker or a rosin producer. I don't look to anybody as competition. I look to them as brothers in arms in this community and trying to push a product that is safe and medically beneficial, recreational beneficial, however you want to call it. It's just it's an overall good product that we can stand behind, and this plant in general. That I don't have any type of ill will or negative connotations to anybody. Even some of the brands back in the day when I first started that would bag on me when I first started doing the diamonds. People talking shit like, whatever, that's your prerogative, that's fine. I'm still gonna keep doing what I'm gonna do, and if I get there, I get there. If I don't, so be it. I'm doing what I love, and I'm sorry you're so angry.
I've kind of heard that in some of your previous interviews, like not directly, but I'm glad you directly said it because it's like, people you said before, people ask you, why do you do this? Why do you take it apart, do all this shit to it, and then just to put it back together? And it's just like, it almost seems like a kind of condescending question because it's like, bro, why do you fucking grow grains and then ferment them and throw them into a fucking barrel and then like ferment them a little more and then boil them off and then filter them and then mix them and then boil it off again and then mix it again and then store it for 25 years?
Yeah.
It's like, because I fucking want to do it.
Yeah, I mean,
it's pretty fucking cool, man.
It's fun. It's fucking cool. That's usually my main response because it's fucking cool. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I enjoy what I'm doing, so I'm not going to stop.
I know,
and it's not like something
it's such a weird thing to like why would you do it? It's like,
yeah, why would you fuck up a perfectly good product?
Because I can, because you can't. How about that? That's the better answer.
Yeah, I mean, there's the long version of that answer is the fact that like it's another way to refine our product and also make something valuable that maybe wasn't so much prior to that, depending on the product that you're initially putting in there, product meaning the rosin. But at the end of the day, it's fun to me. People enjoy it. People have interest behind it. It's showing traction as far as the community, seeing people all over the fucking states. And also in Canada, fucking with it now. I got people in Brazil and Colombia working on the shit now. It's amazing and it's beautiful to me because it's still working with this plant, and it's the fact that we're able to refine this plant, cannabis plant, all the way down to its molecular, cannabinoid structures and shit is just beautiful. That I don't see why anybody would knock on that. Everybody's going to have their cup of tea and what they think is the best and not the best and this and that. But, some people might love diamonds, and some people, I've had people reach out to me that say that my diamond oils help them with their ailments. They stop taking some of their meds because of this shit, and so on and so forth. That's reason enough for me right there. That's if I have only gotten those reactions from my product, then I'm fucking stoked and I know I did well. I got no reason to stop.
100%. So talking a bit more about your role as an educator, you've already done some in-person teaching classes, and you've got some coming up with this. I think it's held by Ice Water Cultivators.
Yeah.
You're one of the individuals that are presenting. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so to back up a little bit, we have Oklahoma class going on again, the 918 Experience Project, I believe. And that's hosted by 918 OG. Jeremy. He's we're going to be doing that again on April 2nd and 3rd of this year. And then after that, we have in September the Ice Water Cultivators. I guess he's calling it a convention, but it's more or less just a big class. That's on the 12th and 13th of September, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I mean they're fun. They're amazing. I love doing the classes. I have been saying this and will continue to say this. I've never thought of myself as a teacher or educator or consultant or anything of that nature. I've only just now recently started to get my speaking habits locked down. Before, I was never a good public speaker. I'm still kind of, as even today during this conversation, still trying to process I know what I want to say up here, but by the time it gets out here, it's usually fucked up. So I've been working on that, but I never thought that it would come to this, where I've had so much positive feedback that people want to learn more from the way that I gain my knowledge. And it's been pretty amazing to see. I've been able to do a lot of these classes with Bird and Pezbro. Just did one, I think, the end of last year with them, or just recently, actually, last month. That was a good one to do. We did it with Mendo Dope Boys, him, Mendo Budsmith, Pezbros, and Bird.
Are these
they're great.
live demos as well as like presentations? Is that what you guys
Yeah,
are doing?
we do everything. Now slowly but surely they're starting to talk more about the cultivation side of harvest and cultivation for hash, not necessarily specifically flower, but for hash production. Then talking about the history a little bit of hash, which is still something that I'm kind of a novice on. So that's why we have, for example, Nick T coming out to the Oklahoma sesh or the class. He's going to talk about
Nick T. Hopefully we could get him on the show one day.
Yeah, I'll definitely put it in his ear as well. But he's going to talk about the history from like 20 years ago up until pretty much talking about mainly solventless, not necessarily hashish or like Moroccan style hash or traditional hash, but new school hash from the last 2 decades. So that's going to be really cool. Then we go from that. We actually show washing, machine washing, hand washing live. In the Oklahoma class, 918OG has the Osprey. So I'll show hand washing and small machine washing, and then he goes over to the Osprey, because a lot of our classes are kind of broken up into fractions of like people who are just mom and pops working out of their garage, all the way up to suits who paid for the class and sent their employees out from their lab, who would possibly have an Osprey or a Icon or a Whistler Tech machine or something like that. So they're
that's unreal that you've got access to one of those machines for one of these classes, because it's like an at-home then grower or maker to then see the difference and be like, fuck, I could be on this scale too. I don't have to be that big.
No, I mean, if you can afford it.
I just mean the quality of like what you can make at home without that, and then
that's the reason I like to teach
stuff. But it's like, look, you can do this.
That's one of the reasons why I like to kind of teach the way I teach. Is I like to show people that you can get just as good quality as the next person that's coming up from your mudroom or your garage if you implement certain steps and make my SOPs or our SOPs your own SOPs and make it work for you. And you can make quality shit in a fucking 10-gallon garbage can if you know what you're doing and you understand the process. Or you could use the Bubble Now Magic washing machines, modify them and do it that way, or hand washing in a 50-gallon drum. It can all be achieved. You don't need like the super high-end equipment to get shit done. You don't need an Osprey, even though they are fucking amazing. You don't need, a Whistler Tech machine or need to have a crazy lab. I mean, that's the thing too, is like with washing environments, people don't realize that you don't need a cold room. It's ideal and would make your life a whole fucking lot better, but you can get by depending on your product and what you're washing if you do these certain steps, I guess you could say.
That's an interesting one. So I have a question to that. Because I think I've heard this from, I don't know, it might have been from you or somebody else that I was watching online. But do you think if you're fast enough and if you keep your vessel cold enough and your water cold enough that you're washing with and a freezer nearby, that you could get by without a cold room
Yes.
and have the same product?
Yes.
Like, yeah.
I did it last night. I was up until 3 a.m. last night washing our first outdoor batch of Sunday Driver that was all purpose for fresh frozen. And boy, was that shit gumming up like a motherfucker. Like on my spatula I use, I was struggling. I have an AC and I have a Colbot, but my AC is too small for my Colbot. It still freezes over. So I'm using the outside air. The temperature up here in the mountains at night can get down to like 40s. So I'll have my AC kicked on, I'll have my door cracked open, letting the cold air come in. But last night I was fighting that same situation. I was like, dude, I have this fire ass shit and it's just gumming up to the bag, gumming up to my shit. I need to figure out another way to keep this stuff cooler. I have a water reservoir that's chilled, but I only have so much water in that water reservoir that's kind of allocated for my wash, not my rinsing and collecting. I have another line that comes from the bathroom area that runs through filtration, but that water is like 55 degrees or so. My chilled water is down to 40, 45. So last night I ended up having to kind of make my washes smaller so I could use more of my chilled water to rinse my bags and collect my hash than using the other hose, which I normally use to do so, because it was not melting the hash but making it more greasier. I also had to keep the door open to let more colder air come in. So there's things that you need to kind of take into consideration when you don't have full access to a legit cold room. Like, I can easily get my room down to 50, 55, but that's about it. Like, unless I'm, washing in the winter and I open up all my doors and windows, and now I have, 38 degree, 35 degree weather coming in. So it can be done, but you're going to fight an uphill battle, especially if you're working with quality shit. If you're working with something that's 6-star or full melt, good luck trying to capture that hash out of a bag when your room's above 55. And I tell people, if you can't get your room below at least 60, good luck. If you're working with really good product, good luck. If you're working with 2-star, 3-star, it's not going to fucking gum up on you, then fine. I've washed in my room when it was 70, 75 degrees, which was stupid, but I did it, and it worked. But I would never wash fresh frozen or something that I know is truly, truly melty in that temperature. That's just, you're asking for a world of hurt. I was struggling last night. I was stressed the fuck out.
So let me ask you this: as someone who had not a tremendous amount of previous experience going into your cannabis career over the last 6 years, do you feel as though being closer to the plant via your wife and her cultivation has made you a better hash maker, or do you feel as though that point is kind of moot and you would have gone on your same journey if you didn't have that hands-on experience with the plant? I think
I would have. I think that I would have gone through that same journey just because of the amount of people that I get to talk to that are makers that also grow, and how they understand the plant when it comes to hash production versus yield flower production. The biggest hurdle I've had is working with my wife in regards to that, trying to find the right cultivars that will produce her a proper yield, but at the same time produce a hash production that will also yield quality hash. Absolutely. Regardless of the actual physical yield of hash, just quality hash. If I get a 2 or 3% and fresh frozen from the wife's garden, I'm still stoked, as long as the the production or hash production was on point. So there was that learning curve, but I also did get to learn a shit ton more by being in front of these plants and understanding what I'm looking for during the life cycle of the plant. Before, we were looking at the hairs, and then them turning white to orange, the pistils. That's typically your traditional way of telling when the plant's done and you need to crop and you need to harvest it. I got her away from that. And now we kind of use that as a back end determination, but also we focus on the heads through the end of its life cycle. I microscope everything, I dope scope everything, and check out the heads when we're in like the last week to 2 weeks, to see that transition from clear to opaque to amber. And I got her to be able to harvest, to understand the harvest times at that point too. Like when you're growing an 8-week strain and you're at the end of that 8 weeks, or maybe a week prior to that, week 7, and you're starting to flush, you don't really need to worry about, like, you're not going to worry about gaining any more weight at that point. You're flushing. You're not adding any more nutrients. Now it's all about your trichome production. So I told her, explained to her that we're going to base our harvest time around when the trichomes are producing this certain type of color coming back to us, meaning that opaque or clear. So opaque is too early, or clear is too early. Opaque is about right, and then depending on your personal preference, which to each their own with it, how much amber is associated with those opaque heads as well. And that's kind of how we base our harvest times now. And I've found that to be beneficial for my side of what we do is with the hash production and the rosin. Now we're still getting that really nice color, but we've allowed it to kind of pop a certain percentage of amber heads to make sure that we get that kind of full entourage cannabinoid effect of the oil maturing just slightly in comparison to something that was pulled with like straight clear or clear to opaque. So I learned that by hands-on and working with her material, and her allowing me to work alongside her in the garden.
So do you guys, are the roles divided in the garden and the washroom, or is there a lot of cross collaboration between the two of you?
Hopefully she's not listening right now, but she never steps foot in my wash lab ever, and it's not because of me. She just chooses not to.
But how often are you in the garden?
More often than she's ever down in my area, that's for damn sure. I mean, like, she just got back from Hawaii. I had to watch her garden for 10 days, so luckily I only killed one baby out of 150, so that's good. Yeah, but I mean, I help her water, I help her transplant. I help, like I said, I do most of the harvesting. I run the trim scene and make sure that it's that the room's at the right temperature and humidity while drying. Unless things are getting processed into fresh frozen, which is few and far between. She might give me a light here and there to run as fresh frozen if I'm lucky, but more often it's just her dried flour. But there's a mix on it. I mean, she has helped. The other problem with running with her in my laboratory or my lab is the fact that sometimes, especially when I'm dealing with the dry hash, the shit's floating around, and once again, she's got asthma problems and whatnot. She says she can't even be down there when I'm washing. It's like, well, everything's wet, nothing's floating around, but it's the terpenes that are off-gassing. She says she has problems with. And I mean, just now we're starting to realize that with like Solventless Mind talking about terpenes and how they off-gas in the wash and this and that. Now he wears a mask, so like a respirator when he washes. I've seen other people starting to wear respirators. I guess it's starting to become a real thing. I haven't noticed it personally myself, but it's interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, you notice a lot of guys who wash have, lungs are irritated later in life, and they're trying to figure out why. And it's wear your respirators, because even in the water, that stuff's in the air.
It's a trip.
The legal facility that I work at, like, it's mandatory for all material prep. Like, you have to wear a respi, like both for particulate and the terpenes. Like, it's too much. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, you figured if it, like we talked about it before, the off-gassing of those said terpenes are the most volatile monoterpenes that we don't want to really have in our body anyways. So it makes sense that can have some type of harm even before you go and light up a banger and ingest it. It's a trip. The stuff that we're learning slowly but surely is pretty cool. Like the fact that we're just now learning about THCP. P as in Paul, THCP. That's interesting as fuck. I heard it's more psychoactive than THC or THCA.
Yeah, a lot more. But it's like it's these novel isomers, and it's all chemistry based, right? So we're taking essentially the CBD base, and we're changing it and isomerizing it into all these different things based on. I mean, the chemistry is so deep. Like I would bastardize it and fail at explaining it properly, but there's just so much behind it. that like when as chemists get more and more into it, they can actually start chasing these novel isomers a little bit more. And yeah, some of them are crazy. Some of them are super, super, super potent.
And they're being found in like very small concentrations, correct?
Right, super small concentrations in the plant, but they're able to concentrate that and take like a CBD isolate base and literally just turn it into anything.
Wow.
Pretty much these
It's
days.
probably like
So,
breaking it down the chain and then getting there. Is that
well,
what
no, like using just chemistry, like adding a chain here using, this kind of catalytic reaction,
Yeah.
or like this over here using this reaction, and then like they're just able to restructure the kind of
like I
molecule
know
they want.
so you know how little I know about that chemistry side of things, and I would like just basic level, but like here's my concern is that in Canada, the regulatory oversight as far as bringing new products to market is fully bore by the license holder who's bringing the product to market. And so
Correct.
so with this exploration into these novel minor cannabinoids that only ever appear in nature in like minuscule amounts, and then we are going to concentrate these things and put them into pens and stuff. And now I'm all about concentrating things and letting humans enjoy things, but cannabis has been concentrated and enjoyed for many years and proven relatively safe, and many other things have. But for that a THCV or THCP pen to be able to just be created and released and no real study done, like does that give you any concern, RJ, as somebody who's
Yes.
well versed? Okay.
Like, I worry that it would be released onto the market untested. And like, I mean, if a company has an R&D license, they can at least do some in-house testing. You know what I mean? So at least they can get some people experiencing what is going on, which is a start. But yeah, some more clinical tests would be advised. You know what I mean? And appreciated. But like, where does that sit with Health Canada? Where does that sit? You know what I mean? Like, you'd probably have to be attached to a university
Yeah.
to some degree,
Yeah.
and take that. I don't know like how to approach that side of it,
Yeah.
but I mean, yes, like a straight THCP pen, probably too much,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, for
Right?
example, I heard Skunkman Sam talking about THCP on Hash Church, and he said he did like a pinhead size of it, and it laid him out like a half-gram dab
Yeah.
for a couple
Like
hours.
THCO acetate, like all these like kind of different other ones too. Like where does this leave us? So it's crazy. It's crazy to think that this is what's going on presently and we don't understand. I think in 5 years we'll have more of an understanding, and then things will be more formulation based.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, like I got some 65% THC, 5% THCP, and like 15% terps. Or
Yeah.
like, you know what? 15% is too much. I think we'll actually be smarter than that by then. I think it'll be in that nice 5 to 8% range,
Yeah.
because we'll have some more data that anything north of 8 to 10 is just lung fuckery.
Yeah, corrosive
So
to the bones.
absolutely, absolutely. So I think it just needs to be dialed back, and like we just be smarter about how things are formulated and reconstructed. Like if that's the way we're choosing to do things, and we're not having just what I mean, just a single representation of what the resin is on that plant, and we're actually able to reconstruct and put it back together, then yeah, it would be kind of a good thing to be able to maybe add a little here or there. But then again, like I said earlier, then where does that sit with the market? Because
Yeah.
the purists are going to be like, well, like what good does that do for us? You know what I mean? And then everyone else is going to be like, well, that's cool. And then what segment of the market do the purists really represent? Kind of like we were talking about earlier in overall sales. You know what I mean? Like I know vape pens in Canada, as just a general example, are in the double digits, and dabs are in the single digits. Flower is like 60%. So where does that leave us? You know what I mean?
Very true.
We're,
Yeah.
we're such a small market segment, at least in the overall sales market, that our high level talks about like what the consumer wants is like what we personally want.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of consumers, it's convenience. Like, it's okay, that's neat, guys. Put that in a vape pen for me that I can throw in my pocket, and I'll try it. And if not, I'm not buying a Puffco, and I'm not buying a rig, and doing all that. And so, I think that it's the slow conversion. A lot of my friends who I went to school with are having kids now, and they're finding that they pop out for a joint on Saturday afternoon and they reek like a joint and they got to go have a shower and change their clothes, and that kind of like dampens their high and the whole point of them popping out for a joint. And so dabbing, when introduced to them is something that they jump at because it's something quick, intense, and the odor isn't as big a factor. And so I think that finding those right methodologies to introduce these extracts will make things more mainstream. But the way you go through extracts is, you start with a vape pen and then all of a sudden you're loving the vape pen, but it's just not doing it for you on Friday and Saturday nights because you're using it all week, and it'll get you through a Thursday or a Wednesday. But like Friday, you want to get a little fucked up. And so then you get a yo can and you get a little bit of concentrate, and you're able to do kind of like the version of a hot knife out of a yo can. And then you start realizing that, maybe you try Buddy's dab rig. Like, there's a progression that has to be made by a wanting consumer to increase their experience. And what I think we're not understood yet is, out of the populace that is going to come into cannabis, where does the vast majority of that group's point of interest stop? Because we all know that those people
inconvenience.
We all know those people who are like, yo, I know I smoke good weed, man. Like, I know good weed, and they don't know good weed, and we're nice people, and our parents raised us right, so we don't tell them that. But it's just they've decided to kind of stop looking at a certain point and go, this is my mountaintop. Whereas a lot of us have continued on and going, no. If you go over this hill, there's many more mountains that you have to climb it, and people are kind of happy with whatever their 10 out of 10 is. And so I think understanding that and trying to meet them there is where we're going to find success in the market.
But I think a lot of the market too is where does the market stop? Inconvenience. Like, people don't want to have a torch and a rig and have to clean this shit. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, as things continue to get more convenient, we will get more of the market segment. Yeah. Right. So like,
you reach more of the people who normally wouldn't do it. You normally wouldn't fucking give it time or day.
Like, it's going to be vape carts, or it's going to be like dab systems with like K-cup Keurig style thing. I get a little pod and I plug it in, and that gives me my.
Oh, you mean a pod like the Indux?
Well, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever the system turns out to be, but like, it's going to be something like that style convenience. I go get my pack of 5 pods, and I come in and I load it into my system, and I just do my thing, and that's my thing, and that's it. And I dispose of the pod, and I don't have to clean anything except a general cleaning of the rig every once in a while. And it's very like, that's the level of convenience they like the general masses need to get into this. My personal opinion.
Yeah, I think the biggest hurdle that we're going to come to see here in the near future is the waste factor of what we do, our industry. I mean, we already know we have a waste problem when it comes to packaging, let alone like the pods that you speak of, if we end up doing that sort of trickery or whatnot. But then on top of like that, the vape carts and the batteries, like the cannabis community here in the United States as well as in Canada, there's no type of recycling system in place. There's no type of like bring your jars in or bring your batteries in. And
so like, there is in Canada.
There is in Canada. Fuck.
There is in Canada. There's certain stores that participate in a recycling program where you can take your vape carts in and basically deposit them in a little bin. They get taken and broken down and made into like playground equipment or some shit like that.
Yeah, I know we have battery disposal
it makes
centers.
It plastic and whatever, but it's a base, like whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
they're not fucking making playgrounds out of fucking vape carts, bro.
I don't fucking know what it is, but they're getting recycled for some shit. Yo, for real.
They're probably getting made into like flip-flops or some shit.
It's some good shit though. I used to work at a store and know about it. For some reason I thought it was playground equipment, but maybe I'm just
Wouldn't be
fucking
surprised,
lit
depending
up.
on what country you're in.
Honestly, yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's the biggest hurdle. That's one of the reasons why, like with me, I always was doing glass jars with metal lids. So at least I know I didn't have any plastic involved with my product. And like with these things now, the calyx jars, after doing a little bit of research and actually talking to their manufacturing team and design team, their caps have a chemical compound in them that microorganisms eat up in landfills before it turns into a microplastic. So you can just chuck these, and you can have a little bit more peace of mind at the fact that this plastic won't get broken down into a microplastic. So that's kind of cool, but they don't promote it as such. Nobody really fucking knows until you ask the questions. They say it's sustainable, and that's it. It's like, well, what does that mean?
I was going to say
Sustainable
everybody
can mean
knows that
anything.
the calyx jars are the best, but yeah.
I didn't get that.
So I wanted to ask
Shut
you a
up,
couple.
Siri.
I wanted to ask you a couple more questions, Nick. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is, and I know we touched on it a bit, but do you feel the envelope has been pushed as far as it can be pushed in innovation on the solventless end, or do you feel like there's still room to go there, and where do you see the room?
Well, I think that's a tough one. I mean, now we're talking about vibration separation with hash and that technology coming around. Sonic
You mean like a
vibration.
Sonic? Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
thought about that. That was an amazing idea.
I mean, that dude, same dude Joe I was talking about that made my first set of plates. He had next to his shop, he had another shop, not his shop, but another company that like polished jewelry and shit. And I don't know if you've ever seen how they do that, but they have these vibrators with a bunch of like stones or like marbles or whatever in it. And he took me over there one day to check this shit out, and this was at least 5 years ago. And when I was just starting to make hash, and I was like trying to figure out how to better collect the hash or whatnot, he was brainstorming with me. I was brainstorming with him. He actually came up with a similar design of what Whistler Tech has now actually released with the way that they separate their hash, their microns. But I saw these vibrating things. It's like, what if I put my hash tray on one of those vibrators to have it vibrate flat, and then also have trays stacked with different microns that you would put your hash on, then that wet hash, put that on a vibrator and have that. I thought about that like 4 or 5 years ago, and then I see Low Temp is starting to come out with their vibration system. I think Hashatron is doing the same thing with the Sonic stuff. That stuff I see as a new form of technology coming out. In regards to how to refine the product even more, I mean, until we can get to that point where we're solventlessly separating different cannabinoids based off of temperatures and times via the press. That was the one thing I had conversations with the cat from Leasing Research, that like there certain cannabinoids actually solidify or liquefy at certain temperatures. If you can find those temperatures, you can do a lot more than just THCA. I was never able to achieve anything like that because I don't have any science. I don't have any labs, or scientific labs I can get testing done at. So, but that type of stuff, if you can do that, and then also going back to what you were talking about with introducing solvents and combining the two sides. I don't know if one takes, like, if that's kind of like if you're gonna do solventless to then reintroduce it to either some type of solvent or a solvent-based process. Why do the solventless side in the first place? Like, why not just run it all through solvent? Or vice versa, you know? I actually take that back.
Yeah.
I actually took a crumble, the last lab that I worked at, the legal lab. I took one of their ethanol extracted crumbles. I took about 10 or 20 grams of that and pressed it on my press and separated THCA from ethanol crumble. It was the first time I ever did that, and it actually worked. But like, you could just run that through a different solvent and grow it however you grow it with solvents and do it that way. But I actually mechanically separated a solvent product. Yeah. It worked fine. It worked great. It reacted the same way rosin did, because obviously it's under the same circumstances, and you're only focusing on that THCA separation. If your solvent product has a high percentage of THCA that hasn't already crystallized, you should be able to do so in the same manner as mechanical separation.
Nick, who are 3 to 5 guys that are doing really good work out in your area, other than yourself, that you admire?
There's quite a bit out here. Had this conversation at the very beginning. I kind of feel like the area that I'm in, Gold Country, is Emerald Triangle. I'm sure Mendo and Humboldt people will probably disagree, but I really do feel it because the soil out here is different than anywhere else in California, aside from the Emerald Triangle, and also just the area, the temperature for outdoor and greenhouses and things of that nature. But in regards to makers out here, there's just as many makers as there are farmers, slowly but surely popping up. Of course, you got my boy Ridge Boys. My apprentice is working with him now. Float Concentrated and Ridge Boys, they teamed up. They've been doing great work. Resin Ranch just moved out to our area, the Grass Valley area. So Resin Ranch, big up to him. We have Real Cannabis Chris, who's crushing those. His melt is next level. Some of the best shit I've seen. He does the clear tech. Like most of his fresh press is absolutely clear, like little to no bubbles. There's him. There's Gold Country Resin. There's American River Extracts across the river from me. He's been making fire from day one. The list can go on. There's quite a bit of heavy hitters out here, and one person can say competition. The other person, like me, says, it's just it's gentlemen doing the same thing, doing the shit they love.
You see a flavor direction or flavor profiles trending in certain directions, and leading into the future. Where do you see those going?
I know it's always gonna be a ebb and flow as far as what the end user or what the community or what the market is dictating as far as what's cool and hip and flavorful and not. Right now, obviously, the big thing is fruits, things of that nature. I felt like citruses have kind of fallen off, and there's more of the melons and fruits and things of that nature, and like funky, like dead rotten type stuff. That's my favorite. Something that's like a rotten fruit with like jet fuel on top of it, for some reason, is just my cup of tea. It's where I like it, as long as otherwise gas. Like the one thing I haven't seen a lot of lately out here is the gas, like proper sour D's, headbands, things of that nature. Just like GMO is the closest you can get to something funky.
Yeah.
I think it's going to go up and down. I mean, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'm seeing a lot of like the rainbow belts and things of that nature coming around our area. California, the Z flavors are still really prominent, especially getting crossed with a lot of other flavors as far as cultivars are concerned. But where it goes, I hope it goes back to gas. That's all I can really say. I'm trying to hunt a sour D that'll produce a proper hash and rosin aside from the flower right now. It's becoming tough. Like I miss it. And that's all my wife grew for about 10 years was a proper sour D.
Absolutely. We never touched on, the name Rakkems and the origin. Can you share with the people where that came from and what the origin of that is?
Yeah. 1 second. That'll be this guy.
That's awesome.
This guy's Rakkems.
Listen to him snort.
Hey, did you hear him?
Yeah.
That's my dude. He is my son. I hate to hold him because he sheds, but yeah, his name's Captain Rakkems. So initially, when I first started making hash and rosin, I had to come to a conclusion and figure out what I wanted to do. Because remember, I talked about that change in career paths. I stopped doing automotive. The one thing that I told my wife was if I couldn't pursue this in the same way as financially as I did for the automotive, I would continue doing the automotive. I wouldn't give it up. I had to be able to do one or the other. So I spent about a year kind of perfecting my craft and whatnot, and starting to make a name for me slowly but surely. And at a certain point, I started to make an income that was at either matched or succeeded the automotive. And I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm good. I can continue doing this. I'm getting on the shelves. This is awesome. I'm actually in dispensaries. I'm starting to work with bigger and better people. So I gave up the automotive. And at that point, initially, I needed to figure out a name. And talking to a lawyer friend of mine that works in the cannabis industry, he had mentioned, don't use anything specific like blah 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 concentrates or blah 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 extracts, because that's just too typical, and it doesn't serve well when you try to actually make a brand of business, especially in the United States, because banks don't like working with cannabis companies. So he's like, just make it something that's like, what's your dog's name? And I was like, Rakkems. And he's like, there you go. It was literally that simple. He's like, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't tie with anything. Rakkems technically is a 14th century pirate as well. I don't know if you've watched the TV show Black Sails, but there's a depiction of Captain Rakkems in that TV show. He spells his name slightly different, but he was one of the very first pirates back then to allow females on his pirate ship as pirates, and not just like whores, for lack of better words. His wife was a pirate on his ship, and he had another female there as well. So there's a little history to it in that aspect. He was a sailor, and you can see the background of my logo is kind of nautical, but that just made it easy. My dog was named Captain Rakkems, and we named the company Rakkems. If you ever hear me say anything that in regards to Captain, that's what we call him. We don't call him Rakkems, we call him Captain. But like as far as our flour or our rosin, sometimes you'll see like Captain's Cake. Yeah. That's because it was just a play on words with, my dog and the flour.
That's great.
And Captain's Cake was just ice cream cake number 5. We changed the name on because it was our fucking flour. So.
What do you name your boat?
The boat's name is Griffin, and it's the original name that was given to it by its last owner. We're not going to change it. We like that one. We actually renamed our little boat, the 23-foot boat. We named that to Rakkems, and that still to this day has a big-ass Rakkems logo on it. But originally it was Captain Barbosa, but we changed that before I actually started doing the Rosin and Hash, and I wasn't going to call it Barbosas, which I probably could, but it'd be kind of probably harder to build intellectual property or anything of that nature with Barbosa.
Might be. Nick, last question we always like to ask is what advice do you have for people who are looking to get in the industry in California? Is this, and I guess not as much getting in the industry in general, but hash makers coming up right now. What advice do you have for them?
Well, as far as California, don't maybe think twice about going legal. California has been fucking us so hard since '64. I voted yes on it, but I did it for different reasons. Me and my wife both voted yes on '64 to help people get out of jail and out of prison for this plant, and that was the main thing right there. Kind of, for instance, kind of what her dad situation was. If he was in here or in the States, he would still be alive today. And there's people that are still in prison for longer than he was for way less, and it's bullshit. So that's kind of like why I did that, and I feel I would hope that other people would vibe the same way as me in regards to becoming a maker and doing it for the right reasons and not just the paper. I mean, obviously that's a good thing if you can find your niche and build your brand recognition if you want to do it that way. But it depends. Are you just doing this just to make your own medicine? Are you doing this to make your medicine to share with your homies? Or maybe a little bit more than that, like we have, myself, Rakkems, and the brands that I mentioned earlier? Or are you trying to get into a professional setting where you're in a lab in a legal space and you own the license or whatever? I mean, patience is going to be key in this whole venture, regardless of what we're doing, whether it comes to acquiring the strains, the genetics that you need, to washing that stuff, to turning it into rosin, and then to also move in that product if you're on a bigger scale than just making medicine for yourself. There's like I won't front, the traditional market thrives out here. It really does. And I'm a part of it, and I'm proud to be. If I had the means and the ways, I want to pay my taxes. Let's put it that way. I want to do this the right way, above the books, for the right reasons as well. But California is fucking struggling, and now they're talking about changing the misdemeanor to a felony, back to a felony, if you get caught with shit. It's outrageous. That's 5 steps back. So in regards to people wanting to become makers, there's other states that are coming on that were like California 10, 15 years ago. If you got the means and the ways to move to those states, I'd recommend it. As much as I love my state and where I'm from, they ain't making it easy, you know. And when it comes to actual production of hash, have patience and know what and just pay attention to what you're doing. One of the biggest hurdles I see is people want to know how quick they can get this shit done. Like, how quick can I get this done? How quick can I just turn it over and make another batch? Like, sometimes it shouldn't be about that. It should just be about you and the plant and how you're working together, whether you're using a machine or hand washing. And also give every avenue a shot. You know, just don't take one way or one road about doing this and have that be your be all end all, because some part of that road might be fucked up for you. I know that's why I like to tell people to take what I would say with a grain of salt and just kind of understand the concepts I'm trying to provide, and then break those down to what best fits your situation, and then work upon that. Not everything that I say or do, just like anybody else, is going to work for you. You know, the parts might, and that's one of the first things that other than that is, don't be afraid to ask questions. I know a lot of people definitely have big egos in this industry. Even, like, I'll admit, sometimes I get way too many questions where I'm just like, fuck off. And I don't mean that specifically to anybody in general, or like, you know, but sometimes I just need that breather. But at the same time, the way that I learned is by asking questions. I've learned by watching people's mistakes. And that's kind of what I'm trying to show with other people as well, is like, learn from my fuck ups and my mistakes and what I did wrong, so you don't do that same shit. That just elevate you that much more.
100%.
So,
I think
patience is key.
What this security is about. I mean, that's how I gained a lot of my knowledge. Is, you know, guys older than me pulling me aside and being like, "Listen, I fucked up, and I've done everything wrong, and this is what I've learned. You go forward and you make your own fuck ups, and when you learn something, you pass it back down." And that's kind of how I lived my life. So I got nothing but love for that.
That's one of the things that I made sure that was clear with a lot of the people, especially the THCA separation. It's like, here's how I do it. Take that, run with it. If you can fine tune it, or like break it down to like less steps, or figure it out, the only thing I ask is you either do one or two things. You come back to me and share that information with me, which I hope you would, and not just run away from it like I figured it out better than him, and or share that information with other people. And like just as easily as I shared it with you. Now, obviously, there's arguments in that with like holding information, trade secrets, and things of that nature, intellectual property in a sense, and also like consulting and charging for this information that at once was able to get obtained for free, you know, by just asking the right questions. I think there's now value in this information that I have been sharing for these last few years. So that's one of the reasons why I'm starting a consulting company.
You get burned a few times, and you know, you feel a different type of way about giving information out. I mean, I think everybody in this room has lived that, and I completely understand. And I think, you know, you have to walk that line of being an educator in the community, and you know, helping those who are coming behind you the same way those who came before you helped you, but also like understanding that what you've learned is valuable, and not everybody has this knowledge, and you know, you need to feed yourself off it. So it's a hard, when your personality and livelihood are tied up in a community that you also call, you know, home with your friends and family. It creates a difficult situation where, you know, you want to give away everything for free, but you have to figure out how to put food on your table. So it's tough, especially when you move from, legacy margins to legal margins. It's a harsh reality. But how can people find you, Nick? Like, do you have any, other than your classes, do you have any, upcoming events or drops that people should know about?
Well, I mean, as far as drops, I got a lot of single source coming in through the washing system here in the next week or so. I got a lot piled up I need to get through. What's that?
What cultivars do you have?
That Sunday driver that we ran outdoor, and then the Menage is up next. I have Grape Louis, Washwater, which is a genetics from Bloom Seed. There was a secret seed pack. They don't know the lineage on them. Allegedly, it's a Sour D crossed with Sour Dub. So that one should be interesting. That one actually smells like a proper Sour D. Kush Mints is coming down the line as well. More of your older stuff. We're still trying to, like I said, the wife is not so keen to exotics and things of that nature when it comes to because growing something, she wants to grow something that's tried and true and that will produce.
I understand.
So taking the risk on a lot of the newer strains and all the crazy stuff is kind of hard for her, but at the same time, being able to do collabs with people who do mess with more of the crazier, exotic, terpier strains is always a plus. But yeah, other than at Rakkems on IG, I will start slowly but surely. Rakkems is going to be pushed to the side temporarily so I can rebrand and start pushing my consulting company. It's IWHP LLC. There's no activity on the page right now. I just started the LLC a couple weeks ago, so I'm in the process of setting that all up. But hopefully here in the near future, I'll be able to separate Rakkems and introduce it back under IWHP as my DBA and start doing it all the right way. You'll see a lot less product from me and more just kind of educational and knowledge drops, things of that nature, as well as continuing to learn myself. The one thing that I'll say first and foremost is I am no master of any of these processes or texts or anything like that. I'm a student just as much as everybody else to this plant. So I'm still learning. Like today, I learned the decent amount from you, RJ. I appreciate that. And you'll probably be hearing from me for more questions, as well as you, BP.
RJ is a wealth of knowledge. I can attest that.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, that's the one thing I wish I had in my arsenal here. Like in my lab, I work by myself constantly. I had an apprentice for a while, but that was at the legal lab I was working at. So I'm always down there just asking myself questions that I can't fucking answer, especially when it comes to like scientific stuff. It's like, fuck, I wish I had a science person here that or chemistry nerd or something like that. It's like that could help me out just for like random questions too that don't really quite make sense to me at that point in time for like why something's happening that I've never noticed before,
Send them over. That's my specialty, the random facts. Jameson and RJ one time were sitting on a call and it was like, what's the difference between a lipid and a fat? And I was like explaining it and Jameson was like, I'm going to look it up. I was like, what, you don't fucking believe me? He's like, no, I just want to. And then he reads it and he reads the same words that I was saying. It was so funny.
Word for word.
But it wasn't like he didn't look it up. He just like was lying back telling it to me. And I'm like, yeah, okay, let's see. And I was like, whoa.
So let me ask you this, like going to that, like, so I hear people say lipids and fats or fats and waxes. Isn't two of those words the same meaning? Like aren't lipids waxes or fats waxes? So I've heard lipids, fats and waxes.
Fats are lipids.
Fats are lipids.
Not all lipids. Well, yeah, lipids are fats. So a lipid is found within a cell wall, right?
Yeah. And that's the wax membrane?
Exactly.
Okay.
So there's a waxy membrane around it. And so like the actual membrane though is made of phospholipids, which is literally the chemical bond. That's what a lipid is. So when you're thinking of a fat, you're thinking of like bacon fat, you're thinking of like whatever. So the fats from those cells, as you're breaking it down, are the lipids and the waxy surface on the cell.
Yeah, I've heard people mention like fats and lipids, and like I've heard somebody else in passing in a different conversation say that those are the same. So whenever I heard anybody outside of like a podcast or whatever, like out in a sesh or something, say fats and lipids, What they really mean is they're talking about fats and or lipids and waxes, which are the two separate things. Fats and lipids are the same, almost the same thing, correct?
Yeah, it just means if it's within the cell or not, right? Like,
Yeah.
because like you have lipid cells, and they contain fat.
Gotcha. It's crazy. It's still all crazy. It blows my mind.
But that's where
every
it
day.
comes down to, like, as you said, it's like it's not actually a difference in things. It's how you're explaining it, and then the nomenclature. And it's like, does it really matter if you're all speaking the same?
Yeah. I think that's the big issue is the nomenclature when it comes down to that, to live versus dead, so on and so forth.
Nick, thank you so much for your time, bro. We really appreciate it, man. We had a great time.
Yeah.
And we'd love to have you back again. Like this was a lot of fun and
dope.
Yeah, be
any scientific questions I'm always here for you.
definitely. Also, my wife's not here yet. She's hasn't got back home, but if she would, I would introduce her. If she could, she can speak a little bit more about her dad's journey. If anybody's ever interested in hearing about it.
I would honestly
Yeah.
really love to have
I
her
would
back.
love
That'd be
to hear.
super hype.
And
If
dive
she's
into
willing to, absolutely.
the
Yeah,
culture.
she's been becoming more and more open about it. We're supposed to do another part 2 with the hashishin, hopefully. I don't know if this year or next year, but to have her more of the topic of conversation, her experience with cannabis and her father. I mean, she grew up with kilos around her baby crib. Her fucking phone was tapped by the DEA, so her mom had to teach her how to talk on the phone, shit like that. Like, I tell you, this is a fucking movie. She still gets a little emotional talking about her father, but she starts slowly but surely starting to open up and start to talk about a lot of the memories she had of him. He was an amazing human.
We'd love to
What's
have
that?
you back. We'd absolutely love to have you
Yeah.
back and love to have her on and talk to her about, so many things, cultivation. And, if any of you watching don't know about the Hashishin, you should go check that out and subscribe and watch all those episodes. We wouldn't be here doing the stuff that we're doing today if it wasn't for, Shiragam and the content that he put out. And so we've got nothing but love. And if you find this interesting, you're absolutely going to find that interesting. So make sure you check them out as well.
So who else you guys got lined up to talk to?
Kaya is next week. We're taking a Sunday. When we're not taking a Sunday off, RJ's host and Brian are going to host a cool Sunday sesh. I think it might be more hydrocarbon focused. I'm going to be at the Regen conference in Michigan. Super stoked to go out and support Josh and those guys and connect with old and new friends and see everyone. And yeah, if you're in the area, you should check that out. You can also live stream it. And then after Kaya, we have
Nicotine. We have Nicotine in May, right?
Nicotine's coming in May.
Just to jump back to earlier.
We've got a ton of guests. We really kind of want to sprinkle it between like big names to small names to Canadian big names to Canadian small names, and just kind of give a smattering of a highlight of everybody's all these different makers from all these different walks of life, and just continue talking about the craft, because I enjoy listening to stuff like this, and the more content like this, the more people we can turn on, and then the more people we turn on, the more friends we have to talk to about this shit, because there was a time when there's very few of us in these rooms.
Yeah,
very true. Or like, even if there was, most people would be reluctant to actually open up.
Super reluctant.
Yeah. Now that the world's changed and it's a lot more accepted, so that's one of the reasons I'm so kind of forward with my journey.
Really?
And within cannabis, my wife was always skeptical about it, especially putting myself on Front Street with Rakkems on social media, and she didn't come from that school of thinking.
Yeah.
And even though I'm old school in a sense and different mindset, as far as like the way that I act and hold myself, I still know that there's this new revolution happening within our community and just general society and technology, and like promoting yourself or pushing yourself if you want to become a brand is really hard, but it's also easy in a sense if you play your cards right and do shit the right way. You can come a long way really quick,
Yeah.
back in the day, that was either just non-existent because nobody wanted to, you didn't want anybody to know the fuck you were, you know. Times have changed, and it's crazy to see.
Absolutely.
Very true.
Absolutely.
I had a quick question about Canada real quick in regards just to all the craziness that's going on up there. Is that affecting the cannabis industry as far as shipping is concerned and things of that nature, as it affected
A little bit.
More on the
But like,
on the commercial
like-
side of needing supplies than actually moving
Yeah.
with said cannabis products.
I'm on the West Coast, so like we had a bunch of highways washed out from floods earlier this year, so like we haven't fully recovered from all of that yet. And with all the other stuff going on, it's just making like, yeah, getting supplies and moving logistically things around a little bit harder. But I mean,
I'm
the
not trying to
mandates
get
and all that shit has been way more of a harassment than.
yeah, that's what one thing
else.
I didn't want to get too political with it, but wasn't sure how it has affected you guys and up there, because I mean it feels like January 6th all over again, but for a different reason. You know, it's like more of a violation on personal health and things of that nature in regards to what Trudeau is pushing along. I don't know how you guys feel about the man individually, but
No, we're not fans. I'm not a fan. I mean, I'll go out in public and say it. You know, I'm not a fan, and I'm not a fan of, you know, being told how we're supposed to live our lives. And you know, it's
Right.
shitty because it's creating a divisive situation just in the social fabric of Canada, where Trudeau's making it where you either have to stay silent or pick sides, and once you pick a side, you know, somebody who you have no, you know, might now think differently of you because of their personal reasons, when really we're, you know, I think that what the truckers are fighting for is everybody's right to choose. You know, if you want to wear a mask, you know, you can wear a mask. So I mean, it's just Canada's a mess, and it's not good, and it's not a popular thing to be talking about, and we hope it all gets
Okay.
resolved soon.
Word.
You know,
Well, I hope
everybody needs their own choice. Like everybody
Yeah.
should do whatever they want to do. It's just
Absolutely. I couldn't agree anymore.
to do what you want to do.
Yeah. Hopefully,
Well,
I'll be
no,
able to
you're
make it
not
up to
allowed
Canada soon
go on the
enough.
street, so no, that's not okay.
Yeah. We'd love to have
Yeah.
you up. Absolutely, man.
Yeah, I'm trying to make my way up to Green Cedar Retreat and kick it with the Gastown boys.
Absolutely.
I want to.
Yeah,
I want to
that's
stay
right.
there so bad, but I was supposed to come up there like 2 years ago, and then COVID hit. So they're allowing Americans up there now, though, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If
Awesome.
you come up, I'm on the West Coast, so let me know and try to link up.
Definitely, 100%.
Awesome.
That
dude.
that
Appreciate
will be
your time.
planned. Yeah,
Absolutely.
appreciate you guys for having me on. Like I said,
Thanks so much.
been following you guys for a minute, and I appreciate what you guys do just as much as Shiragam and anybody else putting on podcasts like this in long format where you can actually break down and talk to people on a real level. It's pretty dope. I mean, it's like I said in the beginning, it's kind of how I learned. So more people that we have like you guys developing these platforms to learn or hear from different makers that have kind of succeeded to a certain extent in any way, shape, or form. It's pretty dope. So keep doing what you guys are doing.
Hey, man, that means a lot.
I dig it.
Appreciate
Thanks,
so
man.
much.
Appreciate that.
Thanks a lot, man.
Like
Have a
the
great
whole,
day.
the
day.
whole industry, the whole industry has been so like open source, right? But with gatekeepers, and this show is like removing the gatekeepers. You know what I mean? We're just talking as anyone would just have a normal conversation and allowing people to see what's real. So definitely appreciate the kind words and appreciate everyone for tuning in. So thank you guys.
Much love, guys.